All right. So I thought it was going to go from the countdown automatically into the next scene, and I just stood there, sat here, staring at it, not happening, thinking, well, clearly more things need to not go right tonight, need to not go correctly tonight. But oddly enough, the problems we had getting things going tonight were related to the testing that we did the other night to make sure everything was running well. So had we not tested the other night, Curtis, I suspect we would have been on in 30 seconds
Flawless.
flat tonight.
Yes.
It would have worked fabulously.
Yeah. Well, we plan to have AI start the stream for us, but AI, it's never meant to work to our advantage.
So this is not the GabCast. At a certain point, I thought about even playing the GabCast music and, just a little bit of nostalgia for everybody. But then it just seemed awkward to have the countdown and then more waiting for us to start talking. So we just decided we'll just do it this way and be done with it. By the way, there's a phone number I'm going to give out here in a little while if you want to call in. I expect we'll be here for probably a couple hours. That's what I'm guessing we'll be doing here. And our purpose is sort of a BellGab retrospective. Just some anecdotes, memories, things that stand out in your mind over the course of all those years using BellGab. Things that you enjoyed about BellGab, things you hated about BellGab. Ways that maybe you think BellGab affected the public consciousness. Anything you want to discuss as it relates to BellGab, we'd be happy to have you call in and talk about all that stuff with us and just have a good time with one another. I guess one of the things to get into is maybe how BellGab started. It was started in the sleeper berth of a semi-truck. It almost sounds, when I say that, the sleeper berth of a semi, it almost sounds like a woman was in labor nearby. All my brain hears is the word birth.
When I hear you say that, the question I have, and I'll just go ahead and start for the audience with this, is how much meth was involved in the creation of BellGab?
It was measured in pounds, not grams. That's all I'm going to say. It was a very highly quantifiable amount. It was very weighable.
And I want to jump ahead to the collective of everything, and then I want to come back. How much meth do you think was consumed per post by each individual BellGabber throughout the history of it?
If you could weigh that all out and have it result in an actual equivalent pile of meth, you would have quite the financial boon sitting at your doorstep. I think that would have been a great way to make some money off of BellGab, but instead I just had to use AdSense. So
can you imagine if you had BellGab, like instead of Breaking Bad, you're the Walter White of it, and it's BellGab's.
When you start a website, you need to make that decision. Do I make this profitable through magic meth or AdSense? Yeah, and I think that's a decision people struggle with when starting a website.
To each their own, tomatoes. So let's go back to the beginning. And actually, I'm going to put up here our phone number and all of our socials. So you should be seeing us. Some housekeeping first before we get started too deep into this. So we are streaming right now on Michael's Twitter, which is Liberace.
Are we though?
Ruby. We are. I checked. So I looked at both. Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Hey, man, it wouldn't be me if I didn't obsess about.
So what did we do wrong the other night when we tried to stream on Twitter? What was the problem there?
I'm sure it's the fact that you weren't verified, that they have to go back through and redo it.
See, this is what I was going to say to you. So I came to the determination that if you change anything about your Twitter, your X profile, that it immediately unverifies you and you go through a multi-day manual verification process, even changing your photo.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot about this, and maybe 3 or 4 days ago, after we tested on X and couldn't get anything to work because I wasn't verified, and I was telling you, well, don't worry, Curtis, because the verification is right around the corner. And then like a day and a half later, I thoughtlessly thought, it'd be pretty cool to use my kindergarten picture as my Twitter profile picture. So I just thoughtlessly uploaded it, and there it is. And then I thought, oh, shit. Now I've just reset the clock on us being able to stream on X, but you're telling me no, that it's not.
So, okay. So yeah, because I was interested. One of the issues we ran into is where do you see whether you're streaming? But it was just a post in your your group or on your feed. So it was right there.
It just shows up as a post?
Yeah, it was right there on it.
It was there?
It was straightforward and easy.
So we
actually.
were live.
No. Back
just
then we
tonight.
weren't. No, whatever
tonight.
related to verification that happened before. But your change of your profile pic didn't put us back into the holding bin for a while.
That's interesting. I
we're
thought for
live
sure it
there,
did.
But in the chat, like I see we have people from YouTube, so it looks like we're good there too, and it looked like it was working for me as well. But if you are watching this on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. Go ahead and put in the chat that you are, and share this. Share it on both YouTube and on Twitter, X, whatever. I wanted to say Facebook, but we're not in Facebook.
No, I didn't abandon anybody like Daddy Art.
Yeah, you did.
I guess for a period of time I did, but eventually Daddy acquired the cigarettes and returned home. That's a component that was never a part of things previously with others. So you can't peg me in that way. Let's see.
I'm just glad that you went ahead and did me a solid by not telling them about the shots I heard fired out in front of my house in my basement before we started, and that's the real reason we were slow to start. I considered asking someone else to fill in for me as the co-host of this because we were concerned about stalkers, but turns out that no shots were actually fired and we were good to go.
There was a particular message here I was looking for. Somebody mentioned Cholo Sizzle, New Mexico. It's funny that you say that because Curtis and I were talking about that just the other night. And what's odd is that when I placed that call, I was on what I guess you could call a business trip in California, and I was not far from Falky's house when I placed the call and said that I was Lee calling from Cholo Sizzle, New Mexico. And in case you don't know what the Cholo Sizzle reference is, at some point in the past, Heather Wade, who ended up taking over for Art as the host of his final and most recent and final streaming enterprise, at some point some old pictures of her were released, and in those pictures you could see numerous tattoos. And on one of the tattoos, it looked like you could clearly see the words Cholo Sizzle, and it became a meme on the forum. And so, yes, and who's going to question? You get a call from Cholo Sizzle, New Mexico. You think, hey, they got a steakhouse there that it's sort of got a Mexican twist on it, but that's it's where you're going to want to be if you're in New Mexico. So Lee from old Cholo Sizzle, New Mexico, called into Heather's show one night. And my only purpose in calling in was to say, why don't you stop with all this complexity with the telos and the this and the that and just use Skype or something, or just plug a phone into a mixer to get your calls on the air. And it was just like, this is not necessary, all of this complexity.
What you're saying is all the things we're getting way ahead of ourselves.
We sure are.
Let's go back. Let's
go back.
This.
Let's go back
so
and hit the beginning
back in that
here.
Sleeper cab. What is it that makes you decide that you're going to, first off, tell us the original domain name that it started with, and why did you pick it?
Okay. Oh, and by the way, we're hoping for guests tonight, but I'm kind of thinking that is maybe not as likely to happen as you might have been led to believe. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But originally, I was a reader of the George Norrie Sucks thread. It was a legendary thread at Godlike Productions.
GLP.
And I became aware of that thread just simply by listening to Coast AM after George Norrie took over and wondering to myself, does everybody else feel the way I feel about this? Because I don't think that this show is especially listenable. I don't think this host is very good. In fact, I think that I'm becoming angry at what I'm listening to. It was actually making me angry. But in retrospect, when you look back on it, it looks silly to have gotten angry about a radio talk show changing hosts. But then at the same time, it does kind of make sense when you're listening to a show for years and you sort of build what feels like some sort of a relationship to the show and the host, even though it's really not. But you as the listener, you kind of start to feel that. And to have someone come in and just from your perspective, just squat right over what you've been enjoying all these years, flip open one of those flap doors like the old Warner Brothers cartoons from like the 1940s. It's where they throw firewood and all kinds of stuff in that flap in the back of your pants. I guess it's actually a poop flap.
It is,
but
yes. Let's go with a technical term for it, please.
What was the point I was making? I just sidetracked myself.
Oh, the reason why. Well, you were starting with the surprise of like why you actually created, why you're so invested. But,
okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
so someone squatted over this thing I was enjoying and just squeezed a terrible link right on top of it. And I was being told to like that. I was being told that that's a good thing, that I should enjoy that this is just as good as what we had before. And it wasn't. Intellectually, I didn't feel like it was on par with what I had been hearing all those years with art. It wasn't as entertaining as what I had been hearing all those years with art. It just wasn't the same thing. I didn't enjoy it. It upset me that something I enjoyed, in my opinion, had been ruined. So I just Googled George Norrie sucks, and here's this Godlike Productions thread with just countless hundreds or thousands probably of replies. For some reason, the people who run Godlike Productions kept repeatedly deleting the thread. I have no idea why. Yeah, it had to be one of the most heavily trafficked threads on that site. It was probably pumping more Google juice. I almost said Jesus juice.
Well, it's all the same. Really quick, not to distract you, but I already love in our chat, if you were to see the different characters we have, we've got a good collection here, but look at the one I just put up. I'm sure that's the real Heather Wade there who responded to you saying, hey man, that wasn't cool. It couldn't be a spoofed account. So if that is Heather, plan to call in. We'll give the phone number again later. Even if it's not Heather, whoever you are, call in.
I don't think it was particularly malicious. I thought it was just good advice. I thought it was good, solid advice. Hey, get rid of all of this fluff, all of this telos stuff that you're paying subscriptions for and that you've got a contract to use. I didn't know about that until a couple of nights ago. Somebody told me that she actually had a contract with Telos. I mean, Telos is a phone system that's known in the radio industry as the sort of switchboard that hosts use to bring their calls on. And it's an extremely expensive system. And one of the reasons it's extremely expensive is because it tests the line in a way. I'm sorry, I'm reading
really
the
quick,
chat.
hold on. Like you're already setting me up here to tell everybody follow us on Twitter. X. I'll never get used to calling that thing X. Twitter is just way too easy. Follow us on X/Twitter. YouTube, TikTok, Rumble, you'll see it's some variation of Spec Sheet tech on all of them so that you can keep up when we actually do our live streams about technology, because what Michael is saying right now, the deep dive you're getting in what a Telos system actually is, you're not going to get that anywhere else. So sure, we're talking about it in relation to all of the minutia that was around art being live and then Heather later. And I think this is a really interesting story to get into later in the points of it, but you're not going to get that level of detail anywhere else. So the Spec Sheet, follow it, share it, watch it every day. There you go. That's my plug.
So this Telos, one of the things that it does that contributes to it being an expensive system is that in the old analog telephone line days, what it would do when you called a radio show is just before the host brought you on, you would hear, well, that was the Telos system sending white noise down the phone line and waiting for the delay to reflect that noise back to the Telos so that it can analyze the white noise and see what dynamic range is missing in the signal. And then it on the fly adjusts the EQing and the compression and various other metrics that affect how the caller sounds right then and there on the fly. It's amazing technology, but it's probably not nearly as relevant today as it was because people are no longer using analog copper pair phone lines that sound totally different from one another on one side of the town versus another. That's just not the environment we're in anymore. Everybody's using ones and zeros to talk on the telephone. We're streaming data across the air to talk on the telephone. You don't have any of these concerns anymore. So the thought of paying for something like that really isn't bringing you any benefit other than having a plastic panel on the desk with fancy buttons that you can push and feel like you're really doing something, I guess. But other than that, I see no advantage to it. Well, that's why I called in that night and said, Lee from Cholo Sizzle, New Mexico recommends you just go with Skype and it'll work just fine. And the show ended shortly after that, but I would love for Heather to call in tonight, not so that she can be ridiculed or yelled at or anything of the sort. I would just say hi to her. How you doing? How are things? How have you been? What's new in your life? What are your thoughts on how the last 7, 6, 5 years sort of unfolded? I would be... no, that's not. The shirt is not silk, and the collar is not felt.
I just want to acknowledge you told me, and I joined this thing, so I feel like there was some kind of contract to this that I would see some chest hair, and I'm not seeing it, so I'm debating whether. There we go. Thank you. I got to get the payoff.
Yeah. How you liking that, ladies? What are you thinking about that? So, so that was why I called. And I recommend to anybody who's going to do some streaming online, you know what I've got here? I've got a Rodecaster mixer, and I've got my phone connected over Bluetooth to that mixer. And anybody who calls in tonight, that's how you're going to wind up being potted onto the air. And I suspect you're going to sound fabulous. I don't see any downside to this whatsoever.
I want to get into it too, but I mean, we're going to, at some point, we'll go completely off the rails in terms of structure to the conversation. But I do want to talk about Art and what it was like to go from his analog connection, which the Telos was beneficial for, to the digital version of him on Sirius XM, and then later when he's just podcasting, and just the reaction, which I would say is visceral on my part of it lost some of its magic in that scenario where you're hearing everything so crystal clear. But let's save it. Let's go. So you're on GLP. The thread keeps getting taken down. You're being told that you should like what you're getting when it comes to Coast at this point. There's a moment where you have a complete break with reality, and you go and you register a domain name and you put up a website. Walk us through that.
Well, the website being put up wasn't my idea. I had no idea what to do with the domain name after I bought it.
So where did when you first bought it, what was it doing?
Nothing. I bought it from GoDaddy, which, that was back when I was stupider and didn't know anything about where to buy domain names from. And it was probably before GoDaddy had such a bad reputation and was seen as such an evil company, and before the owner of GoDaddy started traveling all over the world to kill elephants.
To hunt things, yes.
That's something I'll never overcome, like with Donald Trump Jr. Despite whatever affinity I might have for Donald Trump, I'll never get over his son traveling overseas to kill elephants. I'll never get past that. If he ever ran for president, I would actually take pause thinking about voting for him because of the fact that he traveled to Africa to shoot fucking elephants. That bothers me so much. But anyway, what was the question you asked me?
Yeah, so we're going to the first version of the site. So George Norrie Sucks becomes a forum.
So I bought the domain name on GoDaddy before it became a terrible company. I had no idea what to do with the domain name, and I don't even remember how I got connected with this guy. It might have been through the streamerp2p.com website. There was this
Keith Rowland, right?
No. There was, it might have been through my Art Bell stream, because for a lot of years I ran the first ever Shoutcast Art Bell stream. Nobody was streaming Art Bell. People were streaming Phil Hendry. People were streaming Opie and Anthony. People were streaming Howard. Did I say Howard Stern? But nobody was streaming Art Bell, and it just seemed like such an obvious void to fill. And so I started streaming illegally Art Bell on the internet. And within just a short amount of time, I started noticing that hundreds of people at any given time would be connected to the stream. So I wanted to podcast, and I thought to myself, well, nobody gives a shit about me or who I am or what I have to say about anything. Nobody knows me. Nobody cares. Why would anybody listen to anything I'm doing? And so I thought the best way to go about this is to run the Art Bell stream. And then what I'll do, what is this? Is this what, is it giving me?
There you go. There's your, yeah. Wait, do the heart. We need a heart too. There we go.
Oh, that's just,
I'm pretty sure
I can
that
hear
George
my
sent in
T
the
cell
chat
count just plummeting.
that was going to George Senda in the chat, I'm sure. So really quick, you're coming to the point where I on-ramp into this thing because your stream that you had set up, I was late to the Art Bell experience all around. I wasn't one of these people that was listening to him in the late 80s, 90s. I missed all those moments of him in his prime of being on the air, quitting, coming back, whatever, all the drama that happened with it. By the time I know of Art Bell, he's a fill-in host and weekend host on Coast to Coast.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Like after all of those years of history, all that broadcast legacy, being inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame, receiving the Marconi Award, being nationally syndicated on over 500 radio stations, and then eventually we reach a point where people who are encountering him are seeing him only as the weekend fill-in guy for a show that otherwise is hosted by somebody else.
I mean,
and some of those people didn't even prefer Art over George. They viewed him on the weekends as a downgrade, which I don't really process how anybody had that reaction to the arrangement.
We'll talk about George later too with this, but I mean, I'm listening to Art as the fill-in host, and I'm not seeking out George Norrie streams. I find your stream and start listening to it.
And what did you hear? You heard Art Bell, and then out of nowhere, you're listening one day.
I still remember the night, man.
Do you remember what I was talking about?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Really?
So I believe I listened to your first one that you did, and the second one I called in on. And you were talking about factory workers in America and unions and how screwed up the system is. And I think they were striking. And I'm listening to that while doing some work around my house. And I just think, you know what? He's got this like twisted. And so I got to call in. I didn't know if you hosted like I assume, because I'm listening to old Art shows, I know you're live. I assume you have some serious platform out there. And I don't know that you're the creator of it. I just know it's Michael Van Dieven's Radio TrainWreck.
Had you known it was a guy in his bedroom, you would never have called. You never realized how little legitimacy I had before you placed that phone call.
No, because you did such a good job of like engaging in it to where I didn't turn it off. And also, I wanted to pay that $9.99 per minute you told me that I had to pay when I called in. So there was that.
And I don't feel like I ever gave you what you paid for in that $9.99 a minute.
Oh, I got it. Don't worry.
Did you?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Well, send me the photos and videos. I'd like to see
well,
what you
then you would
wound
know
up
where the
with.
back door into your network is, and I'd rather not.
I'd like to weigh it all out, see if everything was worth the price.
Yeah, give me a couple more years.
So I bought the domain name on GoDaddy. I don't even know what my plans were to do with it. There was this guy named Max from Canada. At least that's what he went by on the internet. Mm-hmm. And he recommended that I start a forum. And he had apparently prior experience. There's Jason Callan with reference to I Blame the Wine. Yeah. We'll talk about the parody songs and stuff too. I wonder if I could play any of those without getting a copyright strike. I mean, they're posted on my YouTube channel. They're there. Yeah. I would imagine so. But Max, as he went by on the internet, recommended that I start a forum. Well, I didn't even know how to install the software. So he installed the software on a hosting account for me, and he helped administrate the forum for me at first. And but then as time went on, I started noticing that he was extremely aggressive with his moderation. I mean, people were getting their accounts clipped left and right. And I'm talking for like just even questioning an opinion of somebody who was considered like, a special person. The simplest infraction was getting people getting their wings clipped. And this was before the forum really had any users to speak of. I mean, there might have been 10 people using the forum, and those 10 were just people. Is it
weird to think about that now that you had that low of a number?
Well, I guess it is, but I mean, everything I suppose had to start somewhere. But there were probably 10 people using the forum, and my thought was, well, I mean, you've got to have some sort of a seed user base here to get this kind of a thing going, and you can't get that if you're going to ban all of your seed users before things get going. And furthermore, if you're only banning people because you found an opinion of theirs troublesome, well, then that means not only are we going to ban 3/4 of the seed people, but we're also going to have a homogenous point of view on everything on the forum. So I ended up having to, because I knew he had administrative access to the forum software, he had administrative access to the hosting account. So I had to wait until a day that I knew that he was busy off doing something. I think he was.
I love the idea that this is clandestine.
Oh, it had to be. I had to wait until I knew that he was busy off with his girlfriend or doing something. And I first had to go into the hosting account, and I deleted his login credentials, and I changed a number of other settings that I thought could compromise things. And then I immediately went into the forum software, and I changed his account status from an administrator to a standard user. Well, naturally, when he found out that I had done that, he went ballistic, and he went on a months-long internet crusade to try and essentially shit on anything that I did on the internet.
For a forum with 10 people.
Yeah. And it was all because I was trying to do what was best for the masses as opposed to what corresponded with his sensibilities. And he wasn't there much longer after that. He quit pretty quickly after that. But that's how the forum got started. And well, no, that can't have happened that way, though, because I specifically remember installing the forum software from the sleeper berth of a semi-truck, so he can't have installed the forum software, but I know it was his idea to do it. Mm-hmm. I know that it was his idea to do it, and otherwise I would never have done so. I mean, the idea of starting a forum was not at all on my mind.
And you had no idea the headache it was going to be to manage, but no. I do want to come back in the chat, give credit for it, because I showed it just a minute ago. Who said that? That you were the best mod.
That was Asuka Langley. And
thank you. I would have butchered that. Thank you for being the one to say. I was always terrible at trying to figure out how to pronounce somebody's forum name, but saying that you were the best mod. So like so many different sites right now could really benefit from learning the lesson you knew instinctively that is part of what allowed the flame of what was BellGab's fire for so many years to be as large as it was, which is a light touch. So yes, every once in a while you have to come in and deal with some things, but for the most part, allow dissenting opinions and give them all the space they can gain for themselves. Like a little bit of arguing and pushing things. I don't care if it's George Norrie, if it's Art Bell, if it's anyone who was ever a guest on that show or anyone who called into any of the things that you did. You can get cut down by any other member of the forum at any point, and that's what makes something special. If it's super curated, I would lose interest in it extremely quickly. So there's a magic to what you did that not many people can do, because the more popular it gets, like the first time your forum name or your domain name gets mentioned live on any terrestrial or satellite radio, that goes to the head of everyone else. It'd go to my head. I'd screw that thing up in 2 seconds if it was my thing. And you didn't.
Don't tell me Ian Punnett died.
He did, yes.
No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yep. There was was it like a week or 2 ago?
Really? Well, that sucks.
Yeah, I remember. So like speaking of dissenting opinions in him, at one point he had, what was the guy's name? Steve something, who would talk about people missing, things like that. I forget the full story that this guy would share, but it was just off the rails interview he did on Coast to Coast one time, and he actually ended the show. And man, I wish I could think of the guy's name, Steve something. But I sent Ian this big long, like not nasty gram, but just complaint about the whole thing. Quail, thank you, walks at night. It was it Steve Quail? I think. So anyway, I write him, and the dude was cool about it. Like again, you got to be able to take some arrows.
Well, that sucks. I hate
Well,
to hear
thanks for bringing the show down. I guess we can go ahead and call it. You want to hit that outro music, and we'll pour
it's
one
been
out
real.
for-
Take
Yeah.
care now. Bye-bye then.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's, God, everyone I like is just, as time passes, it's happening. People are dying. That's really, he wasn't that old. I don't even think he was 60, was he?
All right, let's go look at some Wikipedia.
Gosh.
Okay, I'm going to be annoyed, though, if he doesn't have like a
Ian
decent-
Punnett was 63.
You got it already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's sad. I really liked him. And in fact, when Art quit the first time and Mike Siegel took over, I was thoroughly disappointed with Mike Siegel, as were many, as evidenced by the fact he didn't last more than about a year. Yeah, 63. I can't believe that. Had Ian taken over when Art quit that first time, I think I would have been just fine with that. I mean, it wouldn't have been, in my mind, as enjoyable as having Art there. With Art, it was the voice, it was the just the feeling he gave to things. I think the voice, obviously, though, is the first thing that captured you.
Yeah, I mean,
as you're just scanning the AM band. Well, I didn't really do a lot of AM band scanning. I mean, once I discovered Rush Limbaugh, I also discovered every host on the station that he appeared on.
Here, we got to take the challenge that happened here. If you can see that, I'm being asked to say, let's figure out how bad I butcher this. Gab stationary? Is that what that GabCast stationary or Gaptionary?
So it was liver issues of some sort with Ian, based on what I'm seeing in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
That seems to be the case.
That's too bad.
Well, that's really depressing.
Well, I wonder what he was doing at the latter half of his career. Was he still hosting?
Isn't that something, Richard Groiper, that Richard Hoagland lives and Ian Punnett is dead? That is really hard to process to me. And I was talking to Curtis about this the other night, how I remember in real time listening to Art's show. I think it was in 1996 when Hoagland had his heart attack. And Art announced Hoagland's heart attack on the air. I remember that. And then I remember Hoagland's first appearance. After the announcement was made. And Hoagland didn't directly and explicitly state this, but it was clear he was alluding to suspicions he had that the federal government was responsible in some way for his heart attack. Like the statements he's made publicly about NASA in some way contributed to the fact that he wound up clutching his chest on the floor. And I was just thinking to myself the other night when you and I were talking about this, that isn't it amazing? Almost 28 years ago that was.
Yeah.
And Hoagland's still walking around. I wonder if he's still convinced that NASA did that to him. Well, NASA's so versatile. They can make a moon buggy. They can make that tube food that you suck out of a tube like toothpaste. They teach you how to drink water in 0G. They teach you how to shit into a vacuum tube. They teach you how to float in space. But they didn't successfully kill Hoagland with their NASA heart attack. I would expect a NASA heart attack to be one of the most thorough and complete and unfailing heart attacks somebody could have. You hear the term massive heart attack, you think NASA. That's what you think. But for whatever reason, they didn't quite get the job done with Hoagland there. But yes, it is odd that Hoagland lives and Ian Punnett no longer does. I can't even believe I'm saying that. I don't get over when I find out somebody died. I don't sometimes process it very well.
So what you're saying is we're going to process it real time right here. This is a place to do that. Oh man, so Hog Wild is reminding me. Sorry to take you another direction. That I almost had a stroke one time trying to say those words that I was before, and that you ripped me for calling the show Gabcock. That's great. All the great things that were screwed up by my inability to speak the English language.
Oh, what did you say I was talking about on the show when you heard me the first time?
Oh, it was about either Ford or Chevy. There was something with
the unions. That's union. Right. Okay.
Yeah, union
People are going to be like, "Oh my God, he's been away from this for 3, 4, 5 years. Now listen to him. He's slipping. I thought I saw some drool coming out of one corner of his mouth. Clearly, old age, early onset dementia. MV slipping. He's not what he used to be, and it's clear why things never took off."
Let's define you in order of Art Bell returns. Is this Sirius XM return MV? Is it Dark Matter Radio Network MV? Or is it...
I think this has never really got started MV. That's how I feel. I feel like any of our online broadcasting pursuits, you and me, I don't feel like we ever really truly got started. We never really just stuck to it really hard. And
you want to rip a Band-Aid off and have me just say that I've always thought you should have been the person who took over Dark Matter, whatever that show was called.
Okay, Curtis is saying this to you guys because he presumes you've never heard him say that, but I have heard him say that. And for the record, I think it would have been an abysmal disaster if I had taken over for Art. I think the audience would have hated me. I don't think I would be good at hosting that type of show because I'm too skeptical and I'm too willing to... I guess I hate to sound like, "Oh, look at me, walking in with my stirrups, and I don't take any guff." And I'm not saying that about myself, but I am saying that if I had a guest on the show saying some of the things I've heard people say on Art's show over the years, I don't know that I'd be able to restrain my incredulity. The way you kind of have to in order to present that content.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what would make it good, though. Because first off, again, you got to have, if everyone likes you, then it's going to get boring. I mean, look at me. If everyone loves me, so I get boring really quickly. You got to have some people who are mad at you and think that this is like a train wreck that's gone off the rails. That's a good thing. And then also you questioning people. So Art would take the dumbest story that someone would call in, either as a person calling open lines or a guest that's talking about seeing fairy lights in a forest, and that represents some third dimension. And he would turn that into something interesting. That's the talent he had. The talent you have is different. And it would have been calling out somebody when they went too ridiculous. So I think it would have been fun. I get what you're saying too, though, because as we talk about when Art went to podcasting and internet streaming, there was a complete mistake to try to bring in a co-host. If you had been the co-host the night of the first broadcast of his show, you would have been destroyed, and there would have been no chance. But anyway, let's take this chance to tell people to call in. It's 424-672-5794.
No, it's not.
Isn't it?
No, 7594.
You told me it was good when I said you look at it last time.
Well, you typed the correct number, but you did not say it correctly.
Oh, gosh. Well, there you go. There's the first.
424-672-7594. That number is 424-672-7594 if you'd like to call in and be on the Not GabCast.
Just call a number and start talking about your favorites. Everyone, right now, just pick a random number, call that person, and tell them your favorite story about BellGab.
That would be, that's kind of what I'm envisioning here is questions, comments, things you remember about BellGab. Mm-hmm. Cyclops says, Art Bell was great on the radio, but then when you switched over to the ham radio after the show, he would talk shit about the guests and all kinds of stuff. Completely different person off air. I kind of have a tendency to agree with that to some extent, at least. I didn't listen to Art on ham radio very much, but to a limited extent I did. And the probably most easily recallable instance of that for me is the recording of Art talking on his ham radio, which is on my YouTube channel. And you hear him talking about George Norrie and the fact that he's moved from St. Louis to Los Angeles and what a problem that Art believes that is, what a mistake he believes it is, and that he thinks it's probably because George kind of wants to hobnob with all of those people in Sherman Oaks and, sort of get chummy with the Premier Radio brass. And he talks about how he always worked so hard to keep those people at arm's length and not allow them to have any input on the show whatsoever. And
I don't know how to respond to
I didn't either
don't
at the
either.
time. It really,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, the
I
thing is
don't
that
understand why this happens repeatedly. I have told this thing, stop doing Siri stuff when I hold in the digital crown, but it just insists. I don't understand it. I think the Apple Watch is kind of a flop, if you want my personal opinion. I don't find it to be an especially amazing device. It's not especially useful, and I think if this were at all a smart device, like right now, Siri is on and activated and listening to me on this thing, and I'd never even said her name. I didn't say anything to activate it. Just dumb. Now it's doing it again. Is it because
I think Tim Cook has already won because you said digital crown. That's all he needed.
Yeah,
Like,
actually, I should just end it. Oh, I guess I just lost Curtis. I don't know what happened to you there. So anyway, I think that, long story short, we're using something called Restream in order to connect with one another and get on the air like this. And so I think it remains to be seen exactly how reliable it is. But to those recordings of Art talking about George and his move to Los Angeles, I don't think that he would ever have said that stuff on the air. He didn't say any of that stuff on the air.
right.
But he certainly said it on ham radio. And so you are right about that, Cyclops, I think, to an extent. Tim says, MV, care to elaborate on whatever happened to MV's Radio Trainwreck? I missed that show and format, and the old shows are gone too. In the description under this video, when we're finished here, I'm going to include links that'll have the Google Drive folders for all of the MV's Trainwreck shows, all of the GabCast shows, and all of the old Spec Sheet shows. Should be easily accessible for you. And I mainly stopped doing the Trainwreck show because it was something that Evelyn and I always did together, but there was a point in 2016 when the Trump stuff was going on, and I realized, was fully bought into the Trump, Russia, Putin is behind him, Russia is advancing a Manchurian candidate narrative. She totally bought into all of that. Well, it seemed plainly obvious to me at the time that that was an entirely discredited point of view. And as time has passed, that point of view has become only more discredited. The entire thing is now clearly and plainly known to be a sham, a scam. And even the people that were perpetrating it and perpetuating it and promoting it and pushing it, the 4 Ps, even those people now, at least by a majority, admit that what they were selling to people 3, 4, 5 years ago was, in fact, not factual. But at the time when I realized that she was totally into that and she totally bought into it, and I tried so hard to present information to her to make her understand why this is not something to be interested in or care about or to give any weight to. I could not get through to her no matter what I said. And I don't consider myself a conservative, but I do consider myself, I guess, a nationalist and a populist, and in many instances, what conservatives claim, I guess, to believe coincide with what someone who describes themselves as a nationalist and a populist would believe. So me looking at Evelyn from my perspective, yes, to me, she was a typical liberal Democrat steeped in academia. She believed everything that you would expect someone who has spent a significant portion of their adult life in academia to believe. But I always saw her as being reasonable. I could at least reason with her, and I didn't see her as being zombified in any way. I didn't feel like she was playing for a team at the very least. We didn't agree on things, but that was really what made the show, was the fact that we didn't agree. But I could always hang my hat on the fact that she could be persuaded and that she was reasonable and she wasn't playing for a team. Well, when 2016 came along and I saw there was no getting past the Russian collusion thing with her, that was it for me. I couldn't continue doing a show with her of any kind politically at least. I couldn't continue doing a show. And I think that the correctness of that conclusion is only illustrated by the fact that she and I have not spoken to each other, I don't think, since 2016. I mean,
That surprised me.
She just, I think, kind of realized that from her perspective that I was lost and there was no getting me back. And that's kind of how I viewed her as well. She was just lost and there was no getting back. And if she thinks that Trump is a Putin operative, a Manchurian candidate, a Russian operation, well, then she must think that I'm in some way in favor of such a thing. If she thinks Trump is a racist, bigot, sexist, homophobe, well, then she must think I'm all of those things. Why would I support him otherwise?
That, what you're saying there, drives me crazy about politics now, because, I mean, my political opinion, I'm very much a centrist in a lot of this stuff. So I fall outside of both. Oops.
We do have a call, by the way.
Okay, cool. I was going to test it in just a moment. But what I wanted to say really quick is that whole idea that you have to be everything of the person you're supporting, that just drives me crazy, because maybe you're just supporting the person that pushes one agenda point that you agree with. They have the best chance of pushing that forward, and you could give a crap about the rest of it. That can't exist. And like it bugs me that you two might have a wedge because of politics in between it. And
there's no might. I mean, we do.
Well, yeah, right.
Did.
I mean, because I'm still friends with her, but we don't talk very often. But
I'm not friends with her.
Yeah,
we just we don't have any communication with her.
It's too bad because Hog mentioned something in the chat that's a really funny story that we can skip. It's not really the purpose of this, but let's go to our caller.
Okay. Sorry for the long hold. Hi, you're on the air. And
I'm hearing a Bluetooth.
No, we don't. Yeah.
Let me try to call really quick. That's what I was doing when I brought you up full screen. I love this, that we can do little things like this now. Okay.
Let's take a look here and see what's happening with Bluetooth. Well, it says it's paired. Let's try this.
Yeah,
okay, I'll bring you on.
All right. Can you hear me?
Well, I don't hear you on the phone.
Okay, well, great. I guess I'll mute myself.
No, nothing. Oh, wait a minute. I got an idea. Okay. Say something now.
All right. I'm calling
okay,
east of the
there we
Rockies.
Go. Okay, there we go. Hi, hello.
Great. I would like to know if you have any opinion on a caller from Area 1.
That's interesting. At the time I heard it, I bought entirely into it. But I guess when you think back on the 90s, weren't we all just so naive?
It's a lot easier when you don't have the internet, isn't it, to believe in something?
And the problem, by the way, there with the phone was I had to change the output source on the phone from the phone itself to the Roadcaster. I hope I don't have to do that with every call.
Yeah. Did I sound like I was under like a voice changer, though?
I never heard you. It went to the guy that was holding.
Oh, weird.
Was that you that asked about?
Me.
Oh,
yeah,
that was you?
That was me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I
thought I was under a voice changer there because I'm like, it doesn't sound
you were.
like me.
That's why I didn't realize that was you. I thought, oh my God, this thing is going to make me change devices on the phone for every call. Unbelievable. Okay. Hi, you're on the air. Hello.
Why'd you hang up on me? Anyhow, so you skipped some of the BellGab history.
We sure did. I was a ton of it.
I think you got, I got around 2011 after the Sirius art videos and while I was in the band, and somehow I stumbled upon the site. What the heck happened from, when was it, what year, 2006, 5 that you started?
2008.
8. Okay, so I was about 3 years to the party. So we're familiar with the 2010, 11, 12 to Steam to now, and just wonder if I could dial back to the early years. I'll take this off the air.
Okay, thank you. The early years were really weird to us because for a long period of time, we sat around talking about Art Bell, talking about George Norrie, talking about Coast to Coast AM, talking about every nuanced element of that entire world. Paperboy was on there with his George Norrie cartoons, which were some of the funniest content ever posted. It was called George's iPad, but George was spelled Jorch. George's iPad, and iPad was EYE pad. And it was just little stick figure drawings of interactions between George Norrie and his producer, Tom Danheiser. And it was some of the funniest stuff ever produced. And you want to know what happened to all of it? I moved the forum from one server to another, and in downloading the forum software using an FTP program, I didn't go into the FTP program and uncheck the option that turns files without file extensions automatically into text documents.
And you also have to maintain, like, there was a metadata thing you had to save too with each of them.
Yeah. That I did do that, but I forgot to disable the. Isn't that stupid? In what world would anybody want an FTP client to start changing files around just because they lack an extension? And that was the default option. It was enabled. This was FileZilla, by the way. And so I had to move the forum from one server to another. And I don't remember why I didn't have a non-screwed up copy of all of these attachments, but I didn't. And so when I re-uploaded everything, every attachment was hosed. And it was because of FileZilla that happened. So big tip of the hat to the people at FileZilla. You really ruined a fabulous aspect of a popular internet message board through your software. But there was so much funny content on the forum in those early years, George's iPad, countless other things. And one of the continuing conversations people had with one another in those days was, oh my God, I wonder if George reads this. I wonder if Art reads this. I wonder if any of these people are at all aware that this website exists. And it wasn't until 2013 when Art's no-compete agreement with, I guess it would have been Premier Radio Networks. I don't think they were iHeartRadio at that time. That no-compete was coming to an end in 2013, and so people started going on and on and on about what is Art going to do? What do we hope he does? What do we think he's going to do? What should he do? What might he do? And we started it was almost like play-by-play, people watching the artbell.com website, and any little change to the website that occurred, everybody was in real time just, oh my God.
Oh, and we were like decoding the HTML to it, like every little message we could get from it. Yeah, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
And so then one day the website was entirely replaced with just a pink triangle or a pink exclamation mark, if I can get it out. And of course, everybody exploded. And then people said, make it a magenta exclamation mark. And then we started noticing the exclamation mark was responding to the colors that people were demanding, or I guess encouraging in the thread.
Right.
And the next thing you know, we were plainly aware of the fact that, yes, Art does read this, and yeah, he knows what's going on here. And then Art started posting, and we were all a big part of helping behind the scenes with getting things going as he returned to broadcasting in September of 2013 with his Dark Matter radio. Is that what it was called on Sirius XM? Dark Matter?
One was it Dark Matter? Wasn't it
I think it was.
By BellGab too? The name of it came from...
Didn't it? You know what?
Sure
now that you say that...
it was, but yeah.
I think... So that makes two shows that Art Bell hosted that were named by people on BellGab.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that's right. But do you want to go back a little bit with that? When he joined the forum, you actually verified, if you want to tell the story.
Yeah, I just sent an email to, what was it? art@knai.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whatever the K9, the K9 domain name, whatever email address Art was known to have on that server. I sent an email and he validated the info, and that was that. But wouldn't it be hilarious though if all these years later it turned out that it never really was Art and just like everybody just got totally punked?
That would be great. Like, that's a long con there, and I like
that sure is. My goodness, that would have been. I would I would almost love to find that out, actually. In one respect, it would be kind of disappointing, but in another regard, it would be like, wow, that's just.
Yeah. Well, so two memories that gives me. One is something you and I talked about recently when Art left for good. So Jasmunda and I were doing the Bell Files podcast at the time that he ramped up the new show on his Dark Matter radio network. And so we were going to do a weekly recap and just talk about it and talk about the history of Art, but mainly talk about the recent week of episodes and our excitement around it. It's like a hype show. Well, we didn't get like 2 episodes into it and Art quits. So we go live the night that he quits and we do a live stream. And during this live stream, we're giving our opinions. People are calling, and it was a really good dynamic live stream. It wasn't really a show, but lots of people getting their frustration out, and it was good. But we had this one caller, and if you know who it is, I'm nervous to say tell me, because like it's kind of fun not to know, but we had someone call in and do the best JC impression I've ever heard. Like I've never heard anyone else to the level and quality of like the style, the structure, everything of JC. It was just fun. And like, I don't believe it was the real JC at all, but I was just really impressed by this person's ability to do an impression of him. It would be great to find out that Art that we know was an impression of him being done by somebody else. Cause like his commenting style felt to me very natural to be the real Art Bell. So I don't think there's any question, but it would be funny to find out that it's, what's her name? The lady who ran K9.
Karen Jackson.
Karen, yeah.
Let's take another call. Hi, you're on the air.
This is Tim, the chat.
Are we giving like ambient out to our callers? Because like everyone sounds.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. I mean, and they're all broken up. Someone else try calling in. I want to see if, or Curtis, you try calling the number again. Now that I know it's you.
Okay.
And I want to see if it's broken up in the way it has been the last couple of calls.
Yeah, was that Tim?
Say what?
The person who called just a moment ago. Hold on. I'm calling.
All right. Put your mic down. Okay, now let me change. I got to change this. Stupidly, I have to change it to the Roadcaster. Okay.
All right. I can tell already I sound like I'm calling like with a anonymous sound or
it
voice.
Does. What is that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll do the rest of the show like this.
Yeah, but it's breaking up too. I mean, I could tolerate it if it weren't for the fact that it's breaking up. I mean, it's son of a bitch. And you know what?
I was about to go into the whole thing that I worked at Area 51 on a project, but okay.
Yeah, and you're coming across the wrong channel on my mixer now too. Good Lord. Let's try this. Yeah, it's gonna go the same way here. I know it. Hi,
am I better? Can you hear me?
Well, we can hear you, but you sound like you sound like the kidnapper, and also it like breaks up as you're speaking. So,
how about now? Do I sound now?
There's nothing you're gonna do. It's not you. It's us.
Yeah. Oh, it worked.
Yeah, there's nothing you're gonna do that's gonna fix this situation.
So,
but
remember, we also have a technology podcast that you should subscribe to.
Yeah, clearly we bring credibility to the table. Go ahead, caller, please.
Real quick, I know you're a Trump supporter, and I know politics and the history. MV, are you unaware of community of government and the fact that Donald is actually still commander in chief?
Did you say
we've been at war since 2016? The military approached Trump to run for office. That was an effort. They were considering a coup, throwing Hussein Obama out of office. He brought in under military supervision. He's still commander-in-chief. All I can tell you, bro, is buy silver. Get some silver. And go watch the Fall of the Call series on Rumble. And go ahead and Google on Rumble. Look for Rick Johnson. He'll unpack all the executive orders and everything that outlines why it is Donald Trump still commander-in-chief. And even Donald Trump at rallies, he gives all kinds of comms, and he's constantly pointing to it. But I thought you might to know.
Well, I'm glad you called, but at the same time, I'm really annoyed that I could only understand about half of what you said. So I think what I'm going to try doing here is fully restarting this phone and then reconnecting it to the mixer and seeing if that resolves issues.
I want to remind everybody that like you could buy silver, but you also could buy a BellGab coin instead.
I only want to buy colloidal silver, the one that turns you blue. That looks fun to me.
I mean, buying colloidal silver is only good if you're also going to inject it or drink it.
Would go nice with my big blue eyes.
And your mic cover.
Imagine how piercing I would be with my eyes and colloidal silver skin. I think
the show needs it, Michael. The show needs it.
The show needs it. Okay, so the number 424-672-7594. That is 424-672-7594. Okay, let me bring this up. What I'm actually using here is Text Now. And so, yeah, when I called up and as Lee from Cholo Sizzle, New Mexico, and gave that advice, I mean, clearly no egg on my face. Let's see. Okay. So here comes a call. Hopefully the call is the phone is connected to the mixer.
Yeah, we're going to have to ask people to speak faster and higher pitch so we can try to adjust to sound normal.
Yeah, and see, I just answered an incoming call. Are you there? Yeah, there's no call there. I just answered an incoming call, but it didn't look like it actually.
Do you want to
answered?
try?
Okay.
So in the chat, let me know if you want to call in, be on video, and just use your microphone on your computer. If you want to, I'll put a link in the chat, and you can just join us directly.
And by the way, I would like to go ahead and let everybody know the special guest appearance that I was hoping might happen tonight was George Norrie. Mm-hmm. I did reach out to George. I reached out to Tom Danheiser and George, and I asked both if they would reply to the email and we would send them the same link that Curtis is talking about sending to you, the listening audience, and never got a reply. But it would not terribly surprise me if George did call in, because George Norrie did call in, because he has called into the GabCast so many times, and he's called in at particularly crucial moments where it wasn't to his advantage at all to call in. I mean, totally stepped into the lion's den, a hostile listening audience. One particular instance, I remember he called in while we're doing the show, and Art Bell is in the chat room.
Mm-hmm. How interesting was that?
I mean, that was that was peak craziness. Right. It's like we go from the early years that the previous caller was mentioning, where we don't even know if the website's being looked at, to reaching the point where Art's in the chat room and George is on the phone, and we've got this awkwardness in the air, and we're wondering what's going to happen. Let's try taking this call and see if anything has changed. Hi, you're on the air. Hello.
Hey, MV, it's Pate.
Okay.
Do you have a clip setting?
Okay.
Do you have a clip setting on your board?
Yes, I do. Well, I mean, it's got numerous settings. It's got a full audio processing suite built into it.
So for the channel, the phone line is coming through. I used to have this happen on my board. I would set a clip and have the level slider, and it would just cut out any input that went over that decibel level. It sort of sounded like that may have been what was happening there.
But did you also notice how everybody sounded like Darth Vader? Everybody sounded like they had inhaled. Yes. What is it that you use when you want something that's heavier than helium?
Yeah,
it's not nitrogen.
It's like hexafluoride or something.
It's
goofy
some
like
gas,
that,
yeah. Like you can put it in. You can pour this gas into an empty aquarium, and then you can put a balloon in the aquarium, and it'll just float on the gas because the gas is heavier than air. And you can inhale this. What in the hell is the name of it? Somebody in the chat's going to say. But you can inhale it. You get like this. You get super deep voiced. But you sound totally normal now. I think rebooting my phone fixed the issue. You sound like the old Pate. I've already got a little PTSD from the phone issues, Curtis, please. You sound fine now. I think it
Well,
just took
I
a
am
simple
calling
reboot.
in. I am at a cornfield on a rotary phone, so that may
You
be
got
the
half
issue.
of it right. Will you turn your radio
When
down,
I hear that
please?
phrase, I'll always, for the rest of my life, know that I'm in the presence of a fellow traveler. Rotary phones from open fields.
That and the taxi.
Right on.
So, Pete,
Well, no, don't
Yes,
hang
sir.
up yet, because give us
No,
some
I
stories.
refuse.
yeah, you know what? If someone says the word BellGab to you, what do you? I don't know what's at the front of mind.
No one has ever said the word BellGab to me. I mean, other than over the internet, I've never run into anyone in real life.
Except during job interviews, it
You're
comes
not
up
hanging out at the
regularly.
Yeah, you're not hanging out at the right dive bars. I promise you, there's a bar somewhere in the town you live that someone there knows BellGab. That person probably
I'm
is.
sure there is.
Let's have meetups. Like, let's get together.
I've always recommended it, but I think
I
there's one.
would say
There's
that
somebody.
authorities recommend not having a meetup with another BellGabber if at all possible.
Well,
I haven't even
was
ever met
one
Curtis in
poster.
person.
There
This is the
was
first time you've
one
seen my
poster.
face.
I'm pretty sure lives in my neighborhood because his name was KC Genesee or something to that effect, as I recall. And that is a street in this town that I am not far from. Now it runs from downtown all the way south to Lord, probably like 10 miles. So who knows? I always assumed he was a neighbor anyway, but never met the guy. Yes.
Richard Groiper says, MV, I'm sorry, but it didn't make sense for Art to be more impressed with Heather's broadcast ability compared to yours. It never made sense, even if you weren't interested. I don't know. I mean, maybe he saw something in her. I just don't know. I mean, she had positive attributes as a broadcaster. I mean, anyone who wants to suggest that it was just all terrible and it was all just an exercise in watching somebody fall downhill, I don't think so. I mean, there were times when I heard things from her that made it obvious to me that she does have something that can be seized upon. She does have something that could be harnessed, but I think that the circumstances just really hamstrung her in ways they didn't have to. And I think when Art was out of the picture, if she had just started her own show on his network and called it something else entirely, the net result would have been the same. She would have been doing a show on his network, and she would still be the girl that got his good blessings. So none of that would change. It would all be the case, but it would just be the perception of things would be different. And I think that she would have been received a lot differently. I don't mean to say there were no problems with her broadcasting prowess. I'm just simply saying that I don't know that she was as terrible as we remember her being.
Yeah, let's bring someone on. We've got I joining us. Oh, nice. I like the avatar.
Hello?
Hello. Go ahead and talk. It sounds like you're calling from like
DSL. Oh, that's infinitely better.
Good. No, I was trying to tell you.
Of Art going to.
Listen, this is important. God dang it! The military.
I don't want to hear it. Come on.
You want to hear it? The military approached Donald Trump. He said it himself. Okay, he was approached by high-ranking brass.
When did he say this?
Oh God, it was leading up to.
Or do you know like where he said it? Was it at a rally or on a show?
No, it was on camera. It was an interview. But there's plenty of other proofs besides that stupid proof. Go watch The Fall of the Cabal. Then look into.
Are you a producer or?
No, I'm none of that shit. I'm InterReach. I used to be on your forum. Then you can find Derek Johnson on Rumble. He unpacks all the executive orders. He unpacks the Law of War manual, all the executive orders that go into this. He's been commander-in-chief since 2016. The difference is the corporation, the 1871 Organic Act, has been defunct and completely shut down. So we're no longer ruled under maritime law. We're going back to
sovereign. This is like the basis of sovereign
the republic,
citizen orthodoxy.
No. It's the actual constitutional republic.
Well, I'm not
which is
saying that
which
in
is
like a
sovereign.
critical way. I'm not saying it has
Oh,
nothing to do with the Constitution. I'm just saying that what you're saying is kind of at the foundation of what I hear from people who subscribe to the sovereign citizen movement.
yeah, but that's kind of a lame duck attachment. The better way to look at it is that we're all debt slaves. Okay, so the IRS unconstitutional. Fractional reserve banking ties you to a slave debt system, which is actually the Babylonian beast system, which came out of Europe. All these guys are connected. It's a monopoly. It's a complete web, a Luciferian monopoly that's stretched out across the globe. Why it's taking so long is because many countries, many superpowers have joined up and they're fighting this thing as we speak. Anyways, I know that's
So is he still there, Curtis?
Yeah, I would say
research your fucking talking points. But buy silver. You see what's on with.
Oh, it looks like Big Silver or actually Big Gold just took out your internet connection.
If you have investments, you might want to consider that. Is MV gone?
Yeah, your
InterReach,
we got
a bad connection.
Yeah,
but
so go ahead and add it into the chat. I mean,
Big
I'm sure
Silver
there's going to
clearly is not interested in various forms of information getting out, are they?
Say that again.
I was echoing you. Big Silver is clearly not interested in various points of view being expressed.
You would think that those lines would have been covered with at least copper lines, not.
I don't know really a whole lot about the sovereign citizen movement. I mean, everything that he said kind of to me sounds like the stuff that I hear from, and I do have friends who consider themselves to be sovereign citizens. They don't get social security numbers for their children. And my first thought is, do you know how many thousands of dollars in tax money, free tax money you're missing out on every year? I mean, everybody else is screwing the treasury. You might as well be as well. I mean, we're all headed down the same dark road of irretrievably runaway debt. So why don't you just get in on the screw fest like everybody else? I don't understand that. And they're like, well, we're protecting our kids. I'm like, well, your kids are going to have to get a social security number to get a job at some point in the future anyway. It's not legal to work without a social security number, is it?
Well, that's a whole nother topic. Let's get back to BellGab.
Okay,
I don't think BellGab is going to solve the past of it's going to solve whatever ills Western society has.
We'll solve this question in the comments.
Great.
So,
but do tweet. Or what is it called on X now? Like
posting.
Posting?
Post.
Okay. Yeah, so post to Liberace Groupie and let him know what system of government and tyranny you think would be the best to apply to America, and he'll discuss it with you.
Yeah, I don't think that... something I forgot to mention when you were talking about the hypothetical universe where Art had me or asked me to take over that show instead of Heather. Beyond whether the audience would have liked me or not, which they wouldn't have. They would have detested me. They would have loathed me, and it would have just been absolutely... If you think I would have come out of that situation any better than Heather did, forget about it.
Well,
but the real problem was Keith Rowland, because had he not been in the mix, I might have been trying to sidle up and get myself involved in something over there, but he hated me so much.
Well,
I'm not saying that he never had
like?
any reasons to, but boy, did he hate me.
Who did he like, though?
Well, that's a good question. That really is a good question. Yeah. Was there anyone that he interacted with on a regular basis that we publicly facing are aware of, that where things ended well? Yeah, other than Art himself, and even Art had his reservations and expressed them publicly.
Yeah, so, let's go ahead and go.
Well, before you do, I want to take this call. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey, this is Tim again. Does this sound any better?
Infinitely better. Thank you.
What would you invest in
Infinitely better. Me? What would I invest in?
Silver, gold. Never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, geez. I have no idea. Don't ask me those questions. You were talking about BellGab memories.
Yes.
I was mostly a forum lurker going back to about 2008. There's a particular user, and I'm hoping you can jog my memory here because I cannot remember his name. But there was this guy that posted daily, frequently, and he had this uncanny ability to remember all these details about his own life going way back into the 70s and current events at the time. And I don't know how else to even describe the man.
Was it Kamazat's Automat?
No, it was not him. He seemed to have disappeared, I'm going to guess, around 2014, 2016. Real snarky. I don't mean that in a bad way.
You're not really narrowing it down. I mean,
so
this could
far.
be so many people.
No, it doesn't, does it?
Yorkshire Pud?
God, what
Was he British?
No, I don't think he was British.
Who did he have a
most
beef
of what
with?
he talked about was...
Anybody? I mean,
everybody?
Okay. Well, okay, so that doesn't narrow it down either. Like, I need to know which clique he was in.
How about...
BellGab had cliques.
How... I don't recall him necessarily being into clique. He kind of was an adversary to everybody, opportunistically.
Oh, yeah. Is this the guy that Michael banned several times, and then when he would open the doors?
It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't... It wouldn't
Was
surprise
he
me. I don't
like?
know
Did he seem? Did he seem Eastern European?
I doubt it, but possibly.
Okay. Well,
you're
really, Tim. I got to say, you're really not giving us.
I'm not helping.
I'm going to give this
how
call a
about
solid 4.
Let me throw one more thing out there that
Out of
maybe
15.
could help. I remember his what do you call it? The icon he used on the forums was like a guy at a bar.
Okay. Was it Eddie Coyle?
Eddie Coyle.
Yeah,
that's
him.
Yeah, that's
okay, here's my question. Do you have any insight about that guy or whatever became of him? That is him.
I have no idea. He hated me so badly, though.
No?
Yeah,
Did he really?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't blame him because it was sort of his personality to have a natural revulsion to anyone who had some semblance of what could be called authority. So just being the administrator of the forum, I was already like a few pegs down as far as his assessment was concerned. And any false move on my part from that point forward, he had no use for me. Well, there were a few people like that, but I mean, people who could get past the fact that, okay, I'm sorry, someone's got to be the fucking administrator here. I mean, if not me, who's it going to be? Someone's got to be. Someone literally legit has to be.
Yeah, and be glad that it's you, because anyone else, like I said earlier, reference earlier in the show, they would have gotten to their head, and that dude would have been gone so quick. I mean, like...
I think that the fact that a guy like Eddie Coyle was able to stick around for as long as he did with his natural just revulsion toward any form of authority speaks to how hands-off I actually was with things.
But that dude could write.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He had some interesting posts.
Yeah.
Obviously one of the most brilliant users ever to stumble upon the forum, Eddie Coyle.
That's what stuck out to me, and that's what interested me. Is he was extremely abrasive for sure, but he came off as extremely intelligent and always interesting, even if controversial.
Yeah, you could follow him on X if you wanted to. He goes by the handle Elon Musk.
Oh, Curtis. Curtis, just the comedy relief that Curtis brings to this show. Let me tell you something. 3 volumes prior to air wasn't enough to restrain myself just now.
Let me say that it's not in my contract to bring the show up, so I think I live up to my contract.
Yeah, that was Eddie Coyle. And I don't remember. He got mad about something that I did. I don't remember what it was. Some moderation decision I made, or I think he was posting pictures that I couldn't allow to be on the forum. Because anything that... Like, he got mad about something and just decided to go scorched earth, and he started posting, like, pictures of people being hanged all over the forum. And
like
anything that couldn't be viewed from an office cubicle, I had to remove. I mean, that was, like, there were very few rules, but that was one of them that was just non-negotiable. I needed people to be able to at least look at the forum quickly from an office cubicle without someone just walking by and visually seeing something that cues them, rather than having to actually read the text that you're looking at, which is probably not going to happen.
one of the rules was if Tom Donheiser couldn't look at it from his cubicle, it had to go. We had to protect him and his job.
We felt like if Tom Danheiser couldn't look at the forum from his 2002 Gateway running Windows XP, it just had to go. Anything that didn't meet those criteria, we just were not having it. So that's why the entire forum ran on the real audio player. And I'm proud of that fact. It's something that I, for years, have touted as a feature. That's why BellGab still continues to exist in the hearts and minds of people all over the world. Real Audio Player was at the beating heart of the entire operation. I'll never apologize for that. I'll never take it back. And I'll do it again if I ever start another forum.
This sounds like a threat.
Well,
We know
You're going to
what
want
happens
that
when-
real audio
Oh,
player.
well, thanks for the info. I was hoping for a better ending to that story. I never knew what happened to the guy, but I've always enjoyed you guys for a lot of years. And
You really,
thanks for everything.
it would have been nice had I been able to say something other than he got mad and left. I mean, well, he joined the French Foreign Legion, and 4 years into his tenure as a French Foreign Legionist, he ran for Prime Minister of Uruguay, upon which he learned of his own limitation. No, I mean, he just got mad and quit. So that's what happened there. If you want to call in, 424-672-7594, 424-672-7594, which is also in the little crawler at the bottom of the screen, where you're also going to find some socials. You're going to find my Twitter X handle, Liberace Groupie. You already know about the YouTube channel. And I think this would be, well, not quite yet. Curtis, you wanted to fall back to something a moment ago. And I told you to hold on. Do you recall what that was? If you don't, I'm going to go ahead and go into something else.
Let me think here. So there was two thoughts. The first one was dude calling in, and then, man, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Go ahead.
Okay. So Curtis and I are going to be resuming our tech show, although in our most recent incarnation, we called it, Is This Secure? Well, we're just going to go back to doing what worked. We're going to call it the Spec Sheet. The only way this show is going to differ relative to what we were doing before and calling the Spec Sheet is this time around, it's going to be an entirely video-driven podcast. Not podcast, but it's going to be a video stream. There will be no podcast feed at our website, which is specsheet.tech. Specsheet.tech. If you go there, you're just going to find a series of links, and that's going to take you to our YouTube channel, which is at Spec Sheet Tech on YouTube. That's the name of our YouTube channel. But just to make sure, because it's got no subscribers at all right now, so just to make sure you go to it properly, I would just go to specsheet.tech and then click the link to the YouTube channel and subscribe there. We also have a Patreon set up that we're going to be connecting to this endeavor. And we're going to really try to make something of this. You know, we've done this a few times in the past, but we never really commit to it. We get into it, and then life happens, and we just don't quite feel the motivation to carry on. And I think this time is going to be different. We're going to set up a Patreon. We've never provided any kind of a mechanism for our listeners to be able to support what we're doing. And we would like to be able to broadcast on a regular basis. We would like to be able to get to the point where we're doing a show every day. And if we can get to the point where a listening audience is supporting the show to that extent, that's exactly what we'll do. So we've got a Patreon set up. We have in our minds a certain threshold we're going to reach where instead of doing one show per week, we're going to bump it up to 2 shows per week. I don't know that we've necessarily set that threshold in stone between Curtis and myself yet, but we will set a threshold. When we hit that in terms of monthly donations on Patreon, we'll crank it up and really make a thing of it. We've got a TikTok channel. Do we have a Facebook page for the show, for the Spec Sheet?
That's the thing. So in the chat,
I don't know that it matters.
Type F in the chat if you actually want us to do a Facebook page. I doubt you do.
Facebook feels so irrelevant to me. It feels like
TikTok
feels so boomerish. I mean, it just feels like this is where old people go to feel like they're using the internet. That's what Facebook is.
Yeah, so TikTok, also because I see the comment about it. Like neither of us are saying that TikTok is like the place to be, but there are new viewers there. So join if you haven't. Follow follow us. If we can get to 1,000 followers, we can live stream there, and that's all we're really looking for, is just to live stream to as many platforms so we're available and can bring other people in. That would be helpful. So that just join them and help build the audience. And then also going back to what Michael said, if you enjoy this and you want to see it regularly, support us on Patreon. Right now we have a membership level at $5 a month. You can also do open-ended if you want to, but that level of support will show us how often we want to do this. And if you really do want to see Michael more often and myself, the more interest that gets, you're going to see more of Michael streaming on his own, me streaming on my own, and then us coming together to do the spec sheet again together. So it's all about, like, we're going to do some level of this anyway because we enjoy it. But if you want to see it regularly and you're getting something out of it, that's how you can support us. If you want BellGab to come back, then it's probably going to be a much larger membership number. I'm thinking like $100 a month that you'd have to subscribe to.
Don't promise that.
I'm not promising anything.
That's no longer even in my power to promise, since I don't own the forum anymore. I didn't sell it. I just gave it to someone that I knew that could be trusted to keep it up. Because my primary
Don't act like that. That's my gig. We'll talk.
My primary concern was just all these years of history not being lost. I mean, there's so much there. There's so much brilliance. Some of the smartest people I ever came across, not just on the internet, but in life, were on BellGab. You talk about people like Eddie Coyle. That's just mentioning one person is such a ridiculous thing to even, it's a ridiculous road to go even down. I mean, I would say more than 50% of the people on that forum, a disproportionate percentage of the people you would encounter there, were smart people. They were brilliant people. There was just something about the forum that attracted those people. But, I don't have that sort of control anymore. I gave the forum to a friend of mine, and the one promise was that the forum has to stay readable. I understand that you don't want to run it. I understand that entirely. Believe me, you don't need to explain yourself to me on that. But I want it to stay at least readable. I want it to be up and able to be read by people. And so that's what it is. It's in read-only mode. You can't post on it, but everything that was ever posted on it is there, and that's how it's going to remain. And if for some reason he should ever get to a point where he doesn't want to pay the hosting bill, or he, for whatever reason, just doesn't want to be bothered with it any longer, we have an agreement that it'll be mine again, and I'll do with it whatever needs to be done. But yeah, that's something we don't have the ability to do anymore, Curtis.
Yeah, let's talk about the line of succession here that occurs. Just tell me that someone in your immediate family, gets to take over in that scenario if you're unable to fulfill your duties.
In the event that I'm out of commission, a cat that we gave away 4 years ago will be in charge of BellGab. I don't know where the cat lives now, but I think
probably
there's
in
a
Martinez,
tracking.
California.
They do a
It's
tracking.
well-fed.
They do a tracking thing these days, don't they? I think we can eventually work it out. My RFID cat is out there somewhere, and it will be in charge of BellGab if this ever comes back. By the way, NXOEED, I never knew how to pronounce that name in the chat. He says, I named my cat after George Norrie. We thought it was a girl when he was a kitten, so we called him Nora. Then he suddenly grew balls. So we were like, oh shit, I guess he's Nori now. That's just a little nugget I thought I would drop into the discourse here. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, so let's go back to what I think is a big moment of like an inflection point for everything. And that's when Art came back for his live streaming show, internet live streaming. And he does the episode with Heather as the co-host. Was she a co-host, a special guest? Like right now, I'm trying to grasp the memory to give the official title he gave for her, and I can't think of what it was. But was it like sidekick? Probably sidekick.
I feel like
something
that sort of rings a bell.
So, I mean, we can all acknowledge now that I think she was doomed by being announced that way on it. So like my whole comment earlier about how you would have been a great successor for everything, if you had been on that show with him, then all of that would have been doomed. There's no way anyone who is going to be in there trying to fill a position that is just not able to be, never existed before, was doomed to fail. So I want to hear people in the chat call in, use the link. I'll put it back in if you want to join and do video and or high quality audio. I want to hear your opinions on that and what went through your mind when you had someone who was a regular poster on BellGab and hosted GabCast. Because again, coming back to what you said earlier about Heather and the critiques against her, she was a GabCast host many times. Like I've hosted with her, with you, and then just her, me, and Eddie, and Jazz, and whatever combination of GabCast we were doing. And she did a fine job. I mean, she was totally up to the ability to...
Not everybody agrees with you.
Well, to host a podcast to that level. And then you also look at...
She was fine for that, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to elevate her up into being in arts territory at all. But there was that, and then there was the interview she did with Art that she did perfectly fine. Like, again, all of that showing that she could have hosted a show or co-hosted a show, but no one would have been successful if they're partnered with Art, and then ultimately she becomes the producer of the show too shortly after that, which is a different conversation, and then the host. That whole progression was doomed to failure. I think anyone of our circle of BellGab friends would have acknowledged that's a path to self-destruction. There's very little positive hope that you're going to actually win over a fan base. You would have to have been the second coming of Art, and no one that we've heard so far is that person.
Yeah, the circumstances were definitely shite. I'm going to give the number out again. That's going to be 424-672-7594. It is 424-672-7594. So just a quick recap. I hope that you will check out the Spec Sheet in video forum. I hope that you'll be a contributor to that show, even if it's like $1 a month or whatever. I mean, just if we can get enough people contributing to it that it becomes worthwhile, because it really is time consumptive doing a show. I mean, I hate to call it a show. You know what? I think that's so arrogant and presumptuous to call what you're doing on the internet a show. It's like it presumes your level of entertainment. Yeah. I mean, but I mean, when we're doing these live streams, I'll put it that way, it is consumptive. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. As you can see, we put very little into this show tonight. But having said that, generally speaking, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of prep. And so if we can get some financial incentive to do that, it's going to go a long way to making this thing something that happens on the reg.
Yeah, and like hesitating to call it a show or whatever, or a presentation, whatever. It really is creating a community because of the chat and the people who call in and interact with us. That is all like the base of what the show is to have some level of interaction. If it was just you and I sitting here telling our tech opinions and stories, there's hundreds or thousands of people on YouTube and everywhere else doing that. The point of what we do differently is we're telling you the stories of our real lives. We're responding in a very rational way to whatever's happened in the tech world or whatever new phones come out, or like Apple's Vision Pro. You're going to hear a much more reasoned approach about talking about it in general, or AI, any of that stuff. And we want your opinion and your stories too. Like that's key to it.
And I am willing to make this promise to you, the listening audience, right now. This new show will be entirely free of terroristic threats. I'm Michael Van Deven.
Okay, let's go there. Promise. Talk about it.
Oh, yeah, actually. So it became clear how much Keith Rowland did not like me when our show, The Spec Sheet, let me back up a little bit. So when Art returned to broadcasting in 2015, one of the things he did was start up his stream on his website, artbell.com. But he wasn't ready to broadcast there. Either it was because of contractual reasons or technical reasons, whatever those reasons were, he wasn't ready to broadcast. So he needed some content on there. So the Spec Sheet was the first show to stream. Curtis and I were the first show to stream on Art's artbell.com audio stream. And the first show we did, we were talking about cell phones or cell phone companies. Somehow the subject of Verizon came up. And I said something I was really pissed off about something pertaining to Verizon. I don't even remember what it was. And I made the comment, if I were a terrorist, I swear to God, I would drive to the Verizon headquarters and suicide bomb them. If I were a terrorist, that implies I'm not, and I'm not going to do this. But if I were, I would perhaps go to the Verizon headquarters and do that.
This is very similar to O.J. Simpson's book, If
Well,
I Did It.
Nothing was said about that. We finished the show, patted each other on the back. Entertaining broadcast. We'll see you next week. Next week comes, we're getting ready to do our show, live stream on Art's stream and on our website and what have you. And 2 hours before we go live, I get an email from Keith Rowland saying that I probably have no idea of the chaos and hell that I unleashed last week with my terrorist comment, but some things are going to have to change around here if this arrangement's going to continue. And I need your agreement to these changes with a reply to this email prior to the broadcast of tonight's show. Well, first of all, I was pissed off that he even had a problem with what was said during that broadcast. Second of all, probably even more angering was the fact that we were not being apprised of any of this until 2 hours prior to the next broadcast. Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of an operation is that? What kind of a management style, if you want to call that management, is that? To get a hold of somebody 2 hours before you've had a full week. He had a full week to approach me with this and express that there was any sort of a concern. And had he done so, he probably would have, I would have been receptive to what he was saying. I would have taken into consideration the fact, okay, I am now appearing on somebody else's stream. I do have to take into account that there may be certain limitations and bounds that they would prefer I not cross. But that's not how it happened. Instead, we got some hastily constructed email 2 hours prior to our next broadcast, a week later, giving an ultimatum that I respond to the email and agree to these terms as expressed in the email. Well, I just sat there and stared at that, and I told Curtis, there's no way I'm going to agree to this. Not because I necessarily have a problem with the owner of a stream coming to me and discussing what they do or don't want on their stream, but because I don't appreciate this occurring 2 hours before we're doing our next show. Obviously, this is designed to box us into some sort of a corner, force us into making a rash decision to agree to something because we're under pressure 2 hours before show. Do you want your show to be on Art's website tonight or don't you? You got 2 hours to decide, and there's the send button to let me know you've decided. That was the feeling that I got from the email we received, and I didn't like that at all. I didn't like that style. I didn't like the unspoken message and how that was all handled, and so I didn't even respond to it. And then Keith Rowland started blasting my phone, calling me, trying to get me on the phone. I didn't answer any of his phone calls either. I didn't respond to any typed messages, never spoke to him on the phone, because at that point, there's nothing I have to say to him. There's nothing I can say. There's nothing. It's clear to me this is not a salvageable relationship, because this is not a dynamic between management and non-management that I would ever want to be a part of in any job, paid or unpaid. So that was the last time, the one and only time our show was on that stream. And then
no, we were on there for three.
Were we really? I thought we only did one.
No, we did one episode where I had
again
Jim
the early
Harold.
Onset dementia. I'm sorry.
Envy
slipping.
Yeah, well, yeah, we know what we're getting in it. So our first episode, which was that first test one, Jim Harold joined us as a guest, and it was quote unquote fine. Like, they liked it enough that not only did they want us back, but they also wanted Jim Harold to do a show. So he started putting his stream on there too. Shortly after our experience, he realized, not just because of us, but his own experience, he realized he didn't want his stream to be connected to it anymore. But with us, we did, I think the second episode was clear from their point of view, and it was the third one. Maybe it was 2 or 3. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I believe it was 3. And the third one, we never had a return. And I remember you and I talking about it, trying to decide, okay, is there a reason to have any kind of conversation with them? And I backed your point of view on it, that, you know, there is a argument to be made that this is a launching platform to potentially get more people, because we were getting thousands of people listening to us on it. But at the same time, if it's selling your soul to collect those listeners, it's not worth it. Like if you have to be something other than yourself, then why do it?
I just saw Azare's in the chat. Hi, Azare. You know, I don't think a single one of those video GabCasts that he and I did are still posted. I don't think. If anybody has any of them saved, I would kind of like to see links to some of that.
Did you not do that on your channel? I thought you did.
I did. I don't remember why they got deleted. I have no idea. I just went through and cleaned house one day, and I don't remember why I did that. But
there's a read-only version of it that you can watch, but you have to pay $9.99 a month.
And you have to send questionable photos. There's payment and rash photography involved in getting.
Now, when you say rash photography, you mean taking photos of rashes? Because I'm sure many in our chat.
I will dabble in diagnosing. I mean, if there is a problem, I mean, I'll give my medical opinion.
If there's a problem, you'll solve it.
Richard Hawkins says, "Didn't Eddie Coyle get mad when you decided to put random people on the show? You stopped all the regulars doing the show." Oh, you mean Eddie Dean? Yeah. That's right. Yeah, he did. I think he did. Is that what he got mad at me about?
Part of the connection, yeah. That I forget exactly what.
I think he and all the other GabCast hosts were also mad that I didn't think it was a good idea for Heather to host anymore, because she was a regular host and then she became Art's producer. And I told her, well, I don't really think it's a very good idea for you to host this show anymore, because I could already tell even before she was Art's producer, just because she had established this relationship with Art when she went out to Parump and she did the interview with him. And there was obviously an interaction there. There was a relationship there.
I want to come back to this comment.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
Go ahead and finish. Yeah, but I wanted you to see that because I forgot about that.
There was a relationship there. What was I talking about? I'm sorry.
About Heather. So like when the GabCast changed.
Oh, so
yeah.
People, I could tell that the co-hosts on the GabCast were really restraining themselves in what they were willing to say about various things, whether it was talking about Art or talking about how things are being handled with his return to broadcasting. The energy was so different. Everybody was tiptoeing around and pretending that because Heather's there, now everyone has to carry themselves as if they're in the presence of Art himself, because an extension of Art Bell Inc. is in the seat with us right now.
And he was in the chat usually too.
And so I just felt like, I think it'd probably be best if you just didn't do this anymore, because we can't really do the show like this. It doesn't work. It's totally different. And she understood, at least she said she understood, but I'm sure there was a part of her that was a little upset by it. And maybe that's one of the reasons that she kind of turned on BellGab after the fact as well. Maybe she still harbored some resentment about that. But I feel like I was right to feel that way. I felt like it was just not going to be good for that podcast for everybody to have to tiptoe around. Because if you said anything critical of Art, if you said anything critical about the operation behind how he's coming back,
Telos,
it got really weird, because Heather couldn't speak freely about that stuff anymore. So nobody else could either. And I felt like I was totally in the right to say, I just don't think you should do this anymore. But they got mad at me about that. And then they started, and then they brought Ponyboy Sunset in as one of the hosts of the GabCast with them. And then after they brought her in, they had buyer's remorse. I don't remember why they had buyer's remorse, but one of them reached out to me essentially telling me, yes, one of the other guys brought her in. I don't think it was a good idea, and it sucks, and I don't know what to do about it. And so that's when I just decided, well, I don't want to be the bad guy and go tell Ponyboy Sunset I mean, at least with Heather, there was a legitimate reason to say, you really shouldn't do this anymore. But with Ponyboy Sunset, there wasn't really any reason to say that to her. She was at least moderately entertaining. She at least had a good presence on the show, at least for the most part, the stuff that I heard that people enjoyed. So I couldn't really go to her and say that, but they wanted, or somebody, I don't remember who it was, that contacted me, wanted me to be the bad guy and fix the situation. And so I decided, well, fuck that. I'm not going to fix this situation. Instead, well, I'll fix it, but I'm not going to fix it in the way you're asking me to. And so I just decided, okay, well, we'll just let anyone who wants to host the show. And it's no longer going to be this inner sanctum of sacred cows who all get together as in their little clique and
that was
cast judgment on the forum. And
that was the original plan.
Tell us we're talking about Falky too much. And let us all know how unevolved we are. It was done with it.
Yeah, I mean, the original version of it was a progression from where there's TrainWreck, where it's whatever you want to talk about is the point, and then the GabCast was supposed to be an audio version of talking about BellGab, and so having it be a rotating cast made sense. We got for a long time it was hard to get people to want to join it, and then as art started to get more involved, then you had people join and want to be a part. So I understand both sides of it. The GabCast needed to have a rotating schedule, but then there also was a group of people who were pretty used to being involved. And all of this just reminds me when you and I had a conversation not that long in the past, where I was telling you about my worst moment of hosting a GabCast. And I might as well talk about it here because it feels right in this conversation. There was an episode that I'm curious if the rest of the chat remembers it and remembers it the way I do. But there was an episode that we were doing. This is during the ramp up to Art coming back on the air. So Heather was on it. It was Jazz, myself, maybe Owen. I can't remember everyone who's on it. It's on YouTube if you look for it. But everyone kept saying that Art's in the chat and his wife was going to call in and talk to us. And she does. And it was the weirdest conversation I ever had. Like, never did I feel like I was in a forced conversation with anyone ever as we're talking. Like, anyone was free to be a host, free to call in. We could hang up on you at any time. But I'm sitting there as the driver of the episode, not necessarily the most interesting personality in it, but I have the phone number. I get to pick who comes on and when they go off. She calls, and it's the most awkward, however many minutes it was of radio you've ever heard, because she didn't know what to talk about. We didn't know what to ask her. It was just awkward all around. So I'm interested if other people remember that experience. And if I could have just removed that, it would have been nice, because it was clear that Art told her to call. She didn't care about Art's history, didn't care about BellGab, didn't know who we were. But there is an interesting part that was like an epiphany for me after the fact, as I listened to it again with Michael, telling him that this was just like the weirdest moment I ever experienced during that show, in a series of other weird but natural moments. But it finally clicked for me that Heather was in that room. Like, I'm pretty confident, without knowing definitively, that Heather was at Art's residence, most likely, when that was happening. When you go back and listen to the way she's talking, I get the feeling now, when I didn't think this way in the moment, I assumed Heather's back at her home base. She's interviewed Art. That's all kind of done. I have no idea what's going to happen later when she gets more attached to Art's show. But I'm pretty confident now that she was there with Art there. And that was the very beginning, like days before they actually did the first official show.
I can't imagine. I'm sorry. Were you going to say more?
No, that's it. Like, so
I can't imagine. Yeah. I really would like to know what happened on Art's property there after he died. Because you had Heather out publicly saying that Art killed himself and that she saw the suicide note. And then you have Art's wife, now widow, out publicly asking Heather if she would just shut up and stop saying that stuff because it's not true. And Art dies, and here we have a situation with his widow and this woman who was brought into the situation probably not entirely with his wife's blessing. And now she's stuck with her next door, right next door in the guest house that Heather now owns, and that used to be the Ham Shack. It used to be where Art broadcasted from. Isn't it the same building that all of those old classic 90s shows were broadcast from? That is the house that she ended up buying from him. And I just really have thought so many times, God, I wonder what's happened over there, what the dynamic is, if she's still there.
Well, that would be the most absurd thing to find out, that she's still there. God. And that they found some way to navigate that. Like, where's Art's wife? I think I heard someone say at one point that Art's wife moved back to the Philippines.
Oh, really?
But I don't know that for facts. Like, I'd be curious if someone does know.
That would be the smart move. I mean, with the amount of money that she probably has, she could live so much more efficiently in the Philippines than she ever could here.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of feel like that might be my retirement plan, is one day to just take my money and go to Morocco. I mean, it's $1,000 a month in that country. You're going to live fabulously. I mean, it takes very little. I've got a couple of friends who, the man just retired. He and his wife just moved to Ecuador. It's just such a cheap way to live, and they'll be able to stretch his retirement from Procter & Gamble in ways that they never would have even been able to think about here. They're rich down there, comparatively speaking. And so it's not a hard thing to do. A lot of people do that, retire in a foreign country. It's a smart thing to do. And I think as time progresses, it's getting smarter and smarter as an option. But if I were her, that's exactly what I would have done. I wouldn't have spent another moment here. I can't imagine what upside there would possibly be.
Oh, yeah.
To staying here. Especially, she can't possibly be in that property anymore. That has to have been sold off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious from like 50,000 feet away to know how that story all ended, because obviously we were all connected at one point, and Azure wants you to come to South Africa. I would actually love you and him to be in the same room doing a show, like a daily show. Richard.
How much do we give to the Patreon if we never want to see you again? I would say I don't really think there's an appropriate or a proper answer to that. There used to be, you could, with these online financial transaction services, you could send somebody like $1, and it would ultimately cost more for them to receive the dollar than the dollar itself. And that was a good way to stick it to somebody on the internet. But you can't do that anymore. I think now they got wise and they have mechanisms. But
what
in the past, I could have given you that advice.
Was that Richard Hawkins?
Is
that their name?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would say, my advice there is keep giving us money and we'll see what that number is. Like, we can't tell you yet, so just go ahead and keep donating.
T-Dog135 says BellGab was defeated by Heather Wade. I mean, I don't think that's an entirely wrong point of view.
Let's explore this. I like the idea of saying that because that doesn't fit the narrative I have thought in my own mind. So how does that play out? How did she defeat it? Did she defeat it through the active work of ignoring it?
I think that just the division in terms of loyalties and how they got torn apart. Mm-hmm. You know, people who were loyal to her, and I was too, until she wouldn't mention BellGab anymore, until she started pretending that she had never heard of BellGab. I just couldn't believe that.
I was
loyal. Mean, just like the fucking name of the show itself is the result of BellGab. You having any association with the show, never mind fucking hosting it, is a direct result of BellGab entirely. It's not even like sort of you got a few layers of association here, but eventually it traces back to BellGab. No, it was a direct association with BellGab, and yet she wouldn't mention it on the air. And to me, that's where my loyalty toward her and the efforts that I made to be supportive fell away. It just was such... That was so unacceptable to me. I mean, it was just so unacceptable. It was dishonest. And
of all the moves, that was like the one that has the least ability to pay off in a positive way, is to just ignore it and treat it as if it was not part of your history.
Yeah, I think that's. I guess it just depends on perspective, but I don't think you'd be entirely wrong to say Heather and the story there did contribute to the demise of BellGab. And maybe an argument could be made that it was directly the cause of the end of BellGab.
Well, I would also consider an argument to say Art showing up started the downfall.
I think it did too. In retrospect, I mean, at the time it was cool that he was there, but it sort of had the same effect as Heather being on the GabCast. People were really restrained in what they were willing to say about Art or about the show or about anything connected to any of it. And then there were people who were not restrained, and those people were willing to say whatever they wanted to say, everything else be damned. And that caused other problems because then I had to fend off people who were upset that I wouldn't create a protective bubble around Art and prevent him from seeing unseemly things. Well, no, I'm not. I couldn't possibly. No. I mean,
Defeat the whole reason why he showed up.
To think that was going to happen was just a total misassessment of the situation entirely. Like, if anyone who thought that never understood the forum to begin with, or me, or anything about it, if you thought that was going to happen. And Art himself didn't even seem to really need anyone cleaning things up for him. I mean, he posted there for a good, from 2013 until 2019. That's 6 years of history of Art posting on the forum, with countless examples of objectionable material or insults toward Art. And so I will give him that. I mean, he really stuck it out on that forum for a long time, despite the fact that he was not being protected. But that caused additional problems for me because I can't tell you how many people to this day, one of the reasons that they have some issue with me is because I did exactly that. I stood back and I thought, well, I mean, these people think that the forum's going to be over if I don't protect Art, but if I protect him, it's definitely over.
Right.
Yeah, so you got one option where you might not kill things, and then you got another option where you definitely will. You could end up protecting Art, and then the people who wanted that to occur are happy, and Art feels less stressed about being on the forum. But now 80% of everybody else who didn't want that to happen is gone. Whoopee! Now, what are you left with after that? I mean, not a whole lot.
Well, I mean, that's why I go back to one of the posts that I probably got the most response to that I ever did on there, other than Falky. That's obviously my single achievement that reaches a high level. But when Nori was on your show with you, I think it was a GabCast that you hosted, just you and him, and you had a real conversation through it. Like, that dude went there, took all of the slings and arrows that were thrown at him. This is a forum that it was actively focused on hating the dude, and he posted on it. He even posted under a name that people didn't know was him for a while too. So he was really committed to the thing, and then also calls in, takes unscreened calls, and hears everything you wanted to say, and that, you know, like, that takes a lot more guts to deal with than knowing that everyone is in love with you, even the people who are giving you a hard time with Art. Art knew he was going into, you know, he was on the home team when he went to BellGab, even for the part that was vaguely lovable of it, still was lovable, where Nori knew it was hostile from the first moment, and he just stayed himself. Like, he was authentic to what Nori was, love him or hate him, the entire time, and he still communicated.
By the way, NXOEED says that is how you pronounce his display name. He says he thinks Art kind of fucked Heather over by bailing 2 or 3 months into his big return. And I would kind of like you to speak to this, Curtis, because you presented this theory to me a long time ago, and I've never seen anything that caused me to question this theory. And I want you to take as much time to expand on this as you need to. And the theory that you expressed to me is that Art, throughout his life, enjoyed elevating women to various positions, and then various positions that they were not prepared for. And in his mind, again, we're mind reading here, but this is just us.
It's all speculation.
It's particularly Curtis from the outside looking in at what he sees, and it at least looks like he enjoys elevating women to positions that they are not prepared for, perhaps are not qualified for, and then watching them struggle. And what the psychology might be behind that, who knows? That's another conversation entirely. But this was your theory. I've always thought that this held a lot of water. Feel free to expand on this.
Yeah, so the one we're the closest to, everything else is just the anecdotes of history. But with Heather, you look at what happened. He like, from my understanding of the source of everything, she starts communicating with him on BellGab, just like we all do, and then through GabCast gets more and more connected, and then goes and does a fan interview, which is cool, with everything that happens up there, where she goes and meets him, talks about the show coming up. And then for whatever reason, he decides this is the person that is going to help carry him into the next level of his broadcasting history. So something happens to where she becomes a producer, and then very actively, or booker, and then becomes the producer of it, getting more and more elevated power. And like, I would say for me, the same situation, if you put me in there, I don't have those skills. I've never been a booker for someone who was going to be in the Radio Hall of Fame at some point. And what could happen, like, everything you're going to be doing is you're learning on the fly, and you're going to fail a bunch with that. So that elevation occurs to that level. And then to make it even worse, knowing that everyone who's listening is looking to listen to Art Bell and recapture that mystery and excitement of old Coast to Coast shows from the good old days. When that first episode comes out, he adds her to that on top of all of this. Guaranteed to fail. Like, any person who was going to sit there was going to fail. And I think he enjoyed that experience. There was a part of Art that wanted to make sure that the person he put there, he could maximize the pain output of what occurred. He knew the fan base would rebel against it. So put it out there and get the most out of it. Then when they get to the point of doing the producer piece of it and connecting her still heavily to it, I would say that he overloaded her on responsibilities, basically making this become a 24/7 experience, to where, you know, her life revolved around making sure Art's show was successful. Again, you took a fan and turned them into an actual official person that is tied to the success of your show. And you already made the fan base hate this person by setting them up for failure in your test episode. So already, again, set up for failure from the beginning. I would guess, probably going back to talking that there probably is some level of psychology to it. You had Karen at the radio station, same idea. You know, his wife Ramona back in the day managed everything of his. I would say she's probably more of a success story though. But there's all these scenarios where he's putting someone in a position just, and I wonder, actually, taking it out of just whether it's women only, but Keith too. Like, I guess Keith actually did it for a living. Who knows? I'm thinking that on the fly. But anyway, going back to Heather, set her up in a situation where her world had to revolve around the success of the show. Then the dude just quits. And not only does he quit, but he puts her in his building, in his trailer that he had all of his equipment in, to where she has to sit. Like, there's always the joke of legacy, you know, they always talk about legacy and hashtag legacy. He forced her into that situation, into shoes that she couldn't fill. So, like, even when I say the comment about, I think, Michael, you would have been a great choice to fit in there, the reason you would have been a great choice is because you were different. You weren't trying to live up to an expectation that is not your experience that you should have. So the other piece of that is, if you had taken over his show, he would not have been telling you, talk like me, use the same bumpers as me, use my cadence, change all this stuff. Like, all of that stuff, Art was smart enough to know that those weren't like the keys to success that he was teaching her to do. So I think he was setting her up for failure actively, because he was trolling. Art, like all of us, the reason we showed up on BellGab, the reason we communicate and do stuff, is that level of trolling that we're either watching or participating in is a piece of the entire puzzle. So Art is just like everybody else. He wants to troll. His preferred group to troll publicly is exactly what Heather was. Long story, and you're welcome. Did I cover the points well enough? Is there anything else you want to hit?
Well, I was reading at the same time you were talking, but did you get into the Karen Jackson angle of that as well?
Yeah, basically he put her in the same kind of situation.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I say that all goes back to.
As you can see, I listen thoroughly to my co-host.
Exactly.
Actually, I'm just going over the chat here and some things.
Yeah, I saw. I kind of paused a couple moments to try to look at it, but
the one comment that I wanted to reply to earlier that I forgot about was when we were doing a GabCast and Keith called in and sort of re-offered us being able to come on and do the spec sheet on there, and we kind of said, okay, yeah, okay. But you got to understand something.
To sleep. That was fun if you saw me jump there.
What?
My computer just tried to go to sleep.
Oh, you're not going to want that to happen.
Yeah, anyway, go on.
So he called in and, it was just before Art was to resume broadcasting. I think the date of the test show was July 19th, and the actual first show was going to be July 20th of 2015. So this is just like 2 days before the test show, maybe 2-3 days. It's really coming up. And, we're doing a GabCast. I wasn't hosting it, but I called in and I had a terrible connection at the same time that I called in. So you couldn't hear half of what I was saying. I couldn't hear half of what was being said to me. Turned out that I had bad cabling. I actually had to replace the coax from my modem to the box outside. But I couldn't hear anything. Keith Rowland calls in to essentially bury the hatchet, extend an olive branch, offer us to do the spec sheet thing again on Art's stream. And we agreed, and we sort of buried the hatchet. But two things occurred during that phone call, one of which was Keith asserted that it was not he who had a problem with the terrorist comment. It was Art himself who had a problem with the terrorist comment. Well, that was all I needed to hear right there. When I heard that, I punched out, because to me, that was the ultimate absurdity and hypocrisy. If you could just take the word absurdity and hypocrisy and package them together into a tangible form that could be held up and presented to somebody, that was it right there. Because here's a guy who throughout the 90s hosted a radio show on which people are told the government's changing the weather to kill you, the government's spraying chemicals on you to kill you, the government is using radio waves to kill you, the government's lying to you about UFOs, the government this, the government that, any amount of paranoia and various other questionable theories and assertions are being peddled on a nightly basis for years and years and years, unrestrained, by this same guy. And then fast forward a few years, and a comment like that said on the internet, not even under the auspices of terrestrial radio and the FCC and the authority that it has over terrestrial radio, none of that. On the internet, this comment made in jest, obviously in jest, causes this kind of a fuss. And I find out, at least Keith asserts, that it's the same guy that I listened to for all those years who had this problem with that and who caused the behind-the-scenes reaction that occurred. I'm not entirely sure I fully believe that, but after Keith said that, Art never corrected the record, so I can only assume that what he said was accurate, that it was Art. And that just sank, that popped my balloon in terms of interest in everything that was going on entirely. And someone looking from the outside in might say, well, I don't know why that really affected you that much, but it just did. The whole don't meet your heroes thing, it's like all my perceptions. And, I viewed Art as kind of like this pirate, this cowboy, this renegade from the 90s, sort of hearkening back to my youth. And, we're on the radio talking about naughty things that you're never going to hear during the day when Limbaugh's on. But, wait until it gets dark outside and the overnight occurs, and suddenly we're going to be listening to stories of alien encounters and black helicopters and, the government's
Satellites
kidnapping
being cut
people and
down.
doing experiments on them. I mean, just the amount of stuff that was given free reign, and then fast forward a few years, and it's all been evaporated. It's been deballed, is how it felt to me, and it was just such a disappointment. And so what you've got to understand is that phone call occurred about 3 days prior to Art coming back. And just a few days prior to this phone call, BellGab had a server issue, and Keith Rowland went on Twitter and started making fun of the issue and making fun of me and talking shit about, oh, I'll bet you MV's probably not going to be able to figure this out, is he? Or he said, made some comment to that effect, and people picked up on it on BellGab and were like, what the hell is this? And then Art saw it, and then Art went to Keith and sort of reprimanded him a little bit behind the scenes because of what Keith said about me. To me, that alone is just like, what? How did I get here where this is even occurring? But apparently Art went to Keith, reprimanded him for what he said about me on Twitter. Keith got mad, quit, and now Art's show is about to start with the guy who was handling all or most of the behind-the-scenes technical stuff. Although there was a lot of stuff that people don't realize was being handled by Curtis.
Well, not
the very guy that you're looking at right now, if you knew the number of things that would never have happened in Art's final return to broadcasting without Curtis, you and Curtis, hopefully you'll be willing to talk about some of this. I especially want you to go into the Madman Markham story. You know, people look at me and think that I have all these interesting BellGab behind-the-scenes stories, but Curtis is the real source of some... Curtis's behind-the-scenes stories from BellGab, the BellGab era, eclipse mine easily.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, they do. They absolutely eclipse mine easily. And the one I want you to go into is the Madman Markham story. But
before
getting back to this, Keith quit. Art's about to start his show. Suddenly it's panic mode because, well, he's only a couple of days away from starting, and this guy who's making all this stuff work behind the scenes is just quitting because of Art getting mad about a comment he made about me on Twitter. Holy hell. So, I mean, I didn't even do anything. I'm just living. I'm just minding my own business, and my website goes down. And next thing you know, Art Bell's webmaster quits, and his new show might not go on the air because somebody said something about me on Twitter. Just incomprehensibly unbelievable. So when that call happened on the GabCast with Keith Rowland calling in and the olive branch being extended and the burying of the hatchet, the obligatory burying of the hatchet, it was entirely obligatory because I knew that Art is about to come back. And despite what I feel about Keith Rowland, despite what a douchebag he's been toward me and what I see from him, I can reach no other conclusions. Despite all that, I just have to really shut up and just let it go. Let bygones be bygones. Yeah, we'll put the spec sheet back on. Great. Can't wait to be back a part of it. And you know what? Forget it all. It's all water under the bridge because I just didn't want BellGabbers continuing to henpeck Keith and Art about anything that Keith said on Twitter about BellGab or me or cause him to be more likely to leave again. I just didn't want any of that. And I especially didn't want personally to be connected to it in any way. And so I just had to sort of suck it up and keep my mouth shut. The things I wanted to say during that phone call, I can't even begin. You know what I wanted to say. I mean, anyone listening to this would know what I really wanted to say. But if I had, who knows, that July 19th and 20th may never have happened at all.
Isn't it ironic to think about how many things like that occurred? Because Art, like the comment I said earlier about that GabCast episode that was just super awkward, that was because Art was pushing, and again, it kind of goes back to the theory that he liked to troll the women of his life. He pushed his wife to call the GabCast, and I agree with that question of why no one's done a documentary. I mean, we've talked about
BellGab would be a fantastic documentary.
It would be, but like getting her to call in had no real value to anything. It was just awkward and weird, and it was kind of a flex to show that he could exert power, just like he did with Keith on that situation that you're describing. But the other thing that hits me with it is when you think of Art, like typically you're thinking he's Hall of Fame radio guy because of his broadcast ability, but it's easy to forget it's also his marketing ability. Like he owned the whole distribution system about ad sales purposely because that's where the money is. Like in a syndication, there was the deals he had to be on the air, but then he also partnered
knew
with
better.
the products. Yeah, I mean, this guy is all about, or was all about, making a buck off of the different partners he has. And maybe he thought that Verizon someday, and I don't know, I mean, this is just speculation with the framework of what Keith gave us in that moment, that maybe Art was like, someday I want Verizon to advertise with me and I don't want this coming back to me. But I can deal with somebody saying they cut a satellite during a transmission because somebody was calling in from a location that was unsecured, because that's okay. There's no brand behind that.
Ezra wants me to come to South Africa. Not sure these are the greatest times for somebody as pasty as I to sashay about South Africa. Okay, here's something else I want you to talk about, Curtis. The Madman Markham event. So if anyone's listening to this, surely everybody knows Madman Markham. He was this guy that called into Art's show in the 90s, and he had already been arrested a time or two because he was stealing electrical transformers and various other large, otherwise inaccessible electrical equipment and using it at his house to try and make a time machine. He was screwing with the electrical grid in his neighborhood. His neighbors are watching their power fluctuate. It's not a good thing. People were noticing, not only because of the theft, but because of the draw that he was pulling off of the grid. And it was a big thing in the 90s for a while, this guy. Then he just suddenly vanished. He disappeared. And then fast forward to 2015, Art comes back to broadcasting, and everybody wants to know, is there any possibility of getting Madman Markham on the show? And I think that's where you kind of come in.
Yeah, so this definitely falls into that category of like I didn't hear these episodes when it happened real time. I listened to all of it after the fact on your stream. So I'm a retroactive fan of Madman Markham, but at the same time, I am a fan of him. And this story is awesome. He's one of the pantheon characters of Art Bell and what made him so special. So when he comes back, when he came back to Sirius XM, he wanted him on there. And then when he does his show, he wants him on there. And Heather at that point is the booker, and I think maybe the producer at that point, if my memory is correct. But anyway, connections get made, and this isn't just me. There's several people who are involved behind the scenes on this. It's just my piece of it is what you're going to hear. So the decision is made through that communication that Madman's going to be on a certain night, and this is what's going to happen. Well, the night comes during the day that day, and this guy, Madman, every way he can, he's trying to get out of this deal. Like he's telling you that he's lost power, his cell phone doesn't work, he needs all these different things for him to be able to come on the show. For it to happen. So Heather's trying to figure out how to make this work, get the guy on because it's been promised and promoted, and Madman's going to try to back out. Well, turns out that he's not that far from where I am, like far enough, but I could get there. And other people too who are involved in it can get to him. So we start trying to find solutions to the problems that Madman tells us. Like he'll say, I don't have power right now. Okay, well, we can get you to this.
Isn't that
location.
ironic that would
Right,
be the
exactly.
thing he doesn't have?
Yeah. I mean, at first you don't, like when you're starting to have this conversation, it sounds organic and real. But every time, starting off through Relay, where he tells Heather, here's the reason why I can't be on the air. Heather, myself, and then the group of people involved in this all give an opinion, and then it gets relayed back to Madman. Here's our solution to that problem. And then he gives you another problem. So ultimately, it works out to where we're going to get him a hotel room, and we're going to get him a bus ticket or a taxi to get to it. And I start calling hotels all in the area. And so I finally find a place. Heather's calling too. We get a place for him to go to. And he's having all kinds of issues with that, like wanting to do it and it being a hassle. Then we get him transportation. I do think it was a taxi to get him from home to there. And then he gets to the place and he tells us that he didn't bring the charger for his cell phone. It's like, wait a minute. You've been talking on your cell phone. You know you're going to be calling Art, and you didn't bring your charger. and he gets annoyed about this. So finally we're like, okay. And I think at this point, Heather calls the manager of the hotel, and then I end up calling too, saying, okay, we have this guy, he's on his way. Can we put him in like your business office area, and can you get him a charger and make sure he has good internet or phone line? And then Art gets involved too, and is saying he better have a solid connection. Like, I don't want to hear that his internet is bad, his phone cell signal's bad. So then it gets back again with this manager, get this guy a phone and get him all good. Well, Madman is still trying every way he can to get out of this thing, like to have a roadblock to each thing we keep clearing. And at one point, before we finally get him on the way to where he's going to stay, the reason I mentioned location is I almost left home, drove down to pick this guy up and take him to a place with internet and power, because that's how much it's like, no, you're not going to miss this thing. And there was another person that will stay unnamed who also was probably closer and more able to get that done. But that's the level we were getting to try to make this interview happen. And then the guy like wants food. He wants everything taken care of. It was just like, man, don't meet the people you put on the pantheon of Art Bell, great, stories of the past. I mean, this guy was nothing but pain and obviously didn't want to be on the show. And then he gets on the air, and I don't know if you all remember when he's talking to Art, it just was not the same. Like, the magic was very obviously gone.
My recollection was that he sounded extremely mentally disturbed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that all those things we're talking about, like from the moment that he starts to give reasons why he can't be on the air, because they're all simple, dumb things. Like, you don't have internet, or so you don't have power at your house. Okay, well, let's get you to a place that does have power. And he's like acting like he has no idea what to do about it. Like, the guy, if this dude built the stuff he did and built a time machine, how does he not know how to navigate just the world? Not like the modern world. Like, let's say he was in his time machine and came to an area that didn't have smartphones.
You've gone one level too far. How did he not have power in his house?
Right.
That was how this all started. The power company was upset with how much power he was consuming. The ultimate irony. It'd be like going to pick up an Olympic swimmer at his house and he stinks and you're like, what's wrong? He's like, oh, my water got shut off. It's like, what?
Yeah. Well,
Water.
like for me, like, Heather's my friend, my internet friend that I've done podcasts with. I want to see her succeed. Art, obviously, I'm a fan of him, so I want this to happen. Madman Markham is a legend in the story, in the lore of Art. Like, I have all these reasons, and also just it's cool to be associated with all of it. But then you realize the levels of stupidity connected to this, and it's just like when you take that step back, like it was eye-opening, because those kind of things happen in other smaller ways too. There would be these things where just completely random, dumb things would come up, and you like, as a group, we'd have to solution a problem or an answer for whatever weird thing was going on. It's like, it wasn't smooth. Like, there was a lot of work. Like, Heather was under a lot of pressure to get these people, first off, to want to come on a show, and then also be on it when it was time. Like, I can understand where, whether it's Coast to Coast or anyone who's hosting a large format show, how hard it is to get someone to come on for that long and communicate, even when it's Art Bell.
And this is just, by the way, this story, this is one of many that Curtis has. I mean, this is why I tell you, I know you think because I owned BellGab, or because I was on the GabCast, or whatever the thing is that I was connected to or doing, that my behind-the-scenes stories must be top of the line. But no, Curtis eclipses me. And I can't tell you how many times I've listened to stuff Curtis is telling me, and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm not the one anybody ought to be talking to about behind-the-scenes BellGab stuff. It's entirely Curtis.
Yeah, well, so the question there about we all got paid a lot. No, that's the thing. That's what's so funny about it, is someone probably somewhere was getting paid. Like, I was just a fan. Like, I'm just, like I said earlier, I was a fan. I considered Heather a friend. So what I could do to help her to a certain level, I was going to try to contribute, and definitely be in one of those ways where it's her success, not mine. I'm just a contributor to it. And again, some of the other people who are involved, I think, were the same way. But that kind of stuff becomes a job at some point. Like, it became clear to me that like in that moment that you described earlier with Keith, when he was short-term fired, people were like throwing my name out there. And I had talked to Art directly too about what my skills were.
I so wish that would have happened.
Oh, but like,
I feel like things would have been very different.
But the thing is, though, just like what I said about, you would be smart enough if Art came to you.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and said, "Hey, I want you to be on the first show as whatever the position that Heather was holding in it." You knew already that was bad. that there's no win for you in it. I also knew that, like, let me stay the fanboy on this, doing things to help and contribute if I can. But the moment this becomes a job, it's going to suck very badly. And the pressure will grow even more, because like for me, with all the stories that I share, like, you know, it wasn't my job. I could back out of it. But the other thing too, like I saw somebody mention in the chat earlier, talking about the Blitz and all the things we did with that. Like, it's just funny how getting people nudged in a direction to see things happen and then staying out of it. Like I've talked about some of it already in other shows we did after the fact, but helping push the Blitz, moving it forward. It wasn't my idea for the Blitz, but same idea of, there's a problem, how can we solve it with promotion.
Hog Wild has a comment here. He says, Heather called MV just after he had a car accident and had zero empathy for his situation and could only focus on herself. Brutal. I had forgotten entirely about that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, as I say, there was this period of time after she started where I tried to do everything I could to be supportive. She had some verbal tics that I kind of talked to her about. I mean, it was like to get her to sound better, you know. She was doing various things that just, you need to stop doing that. So I would give her little pointers and I would help her out here and there and give her little boosts, hey, just keep plugging along. Of course, you're not as good as Art, and of course, not everybody's going to like you. I'm sure at some point along the way, I even said the words to her, had I been, plunked into your situation, the reaction would be nearly identical for me as it is to you. So try to be very supportive. And from time to time, she would call me up and we would chat. Although it never went into simp mode. I know there were some people who were communicating with her behind the scenes, and she was sort of working them into simp mode to like be her little errand boys behind the scenes, I guess, because something may come of it. I guess. Yeah. I guess that's the whole rationale. You know what I'm talking about when it comes to the relationships that some women keep with various men, kept at arm's length, the friend zone thing, but at the same time you allow the little possibility that someday things may progress in the way you really hoped they would. So you keep simping. And a lot of guys, I think I figured out when I was in my early 20s that this is not a good way forward. But some people have to get much further into life, some men, before they realize this. And there were a lot of guys who were simping out behind the scenes for her, but it never was like that with me. I think she kind of always just sort of knew not to take things in that direction with me. And but nevertheless, she would call me from time to time, and I would say reassuring things and try to make her feel better, because I did, as a human being and as someone who had communicated with me for, at this point, years prior to any of this happening. Of course, I was going to be nice and supportive and helpful and all of those things. But then one day I'm driving around, some guy, I've got my kids in the back seat. Some guy rear ends us at a stoplight and whiplashes me. My kids are in the back seat crying. The guy takes off. It's a hit and run. So I tried to chase the guy, but I was driving a car that, let's just say, was not going to catch up. And so I had to pull over to the side of the road, call the police, filed a police report, and everybody's all shaken up. And as I'm standing there waiting, it was after the police officer left, I took my kids to the mall, change of scene, let's go walk around, get this off of our heads. And we're still really shaken up. My kids are still rattled. But I just thought, we'll go to Barnes and Noble, let the kids play in the little, kid play area they got back there. You can dig around in the sand and throw books at each other. And so we go back there and we do that. And as I'm watching my kids play, my phone rings and it's Heather, and I pick up the phone. And after all the nice things I've said to her, all the supportive phone calls I've had with her, all the times I've been there for her and stood up for her, maybe not aggressively, but I certainly never trash talked her or anything like that. And I'm getting a phone call from her, and she immediately, and I say, I'm sorry, it might not be the best time. We were just in a car accident, and we're really, and she totally blew past what I said and immediately launched into, I was just told that you are going around telling people to prank call my show. And
they don't need you to say that.
And she, as if my input, she was being totally left alone until I waddled up and put my finger on the scale, and now suddenly, all hell has broken loose. I mean, just the premise there is absurd on its face, but never mind that. Let's just pretend the premise makes sense. It was just ridiculous after all the history prior to that. And but it just really struck me. She didn't even have any regard for the fact that I had just been in a car accident with my children, and that I told her that at the very beginning of the phone call. Maybe this isn't the best time. And that was where I punched out. That was the moment that I realized I was not dealing with rationality.
Right.
I was not, in dealing with her, I didn't feel like I was dealing with a normal situation. And put yourself in her shoes during that phone call. Is there any circumstance where you call someone for anything and they tell you, I was just in a car accident with my children in the back seat? Is there any universe in which you do anything other than say, oh, crap, holy crap, are you okay? Is everyone all right? Oh, my God. I'll let you go. Do you need me to let you go? I'll get it. I'll hit you later. It's not a problem. No, I mean, that's what any normal person would do.
How many times have we had small thing, like we were going to do a live stream or just test something, whatever, and something comes up.
And Curtis will be like, Michael, I shit myself and I can't do the show. And I'll be like, Curtis, no one can smell on the internet. And you're like, oh, shit, that's right.
I'm glad
so we do the show. We plow through. We do it live.
That's right. But yeah, I got to put this on there because Richard's calling you out on it. But yeah, so like the thing is,
Richard, stop that.
With that, to give her side of this, not that it justifies anything, because I agree that any rational person would have read the room in that moment and dealt with it. But she was in that position that Art trolled her into to put the pressure on her heavily. Like the pressure was at a level that she didn't know how to process, is my opinion. I say that from having also had plenty of phone calls with her where she's dealing with the backlash or just how do you solve this next problem? And the thing is, I know that like I was involved in my piece of it, and there was other people that were involved with more. And then there's probably plenty that she had to just solve on her own that she never even reached out to anyone else to get help on. But the level of pressure she put herself under and Art imposed on her, I think. And Keith Rowland was her boss to a certain level, because the way I understand it, and I could be wrong, but this is the way I've always understood, she assumed everything that Art had skin in the game for this show when she took it over. She's in his old house with his equipment, that Telos equipment that they had a contract with that they were paying for, and Keith needed to make money too. So Keith is probably pushing her hard, saying, I've bet on you to earn income, and we have these outgoing bills we have to pay. You are now in the seat, so you got to help pay them. So the pressure on her was ridiculous. That doesn't absolve her from understanding how to read a room at all, or even the audience that she had in BellGab, because it's okay for BellGab to be trolling her, to be hating on what she's doing, all of those things. That's part of being a public persona. You want that. Like if 80% of your audience loves you, that's not anywhere near as engaging as 40% loving you, 40% hating you, and the other ones are just listening because it's chaos. Like, that is the recipe for a good show. And she should have embraced that other 40% that hated her and were hate listening, because they were listening just as actively. But it's hard to do. Like, I can imagine, I can't imagine being in that position, but I can imagine the things that you should be thinking about if you are in that position. And it just was too much for her. It would have been too much for me too. I wouldn't have been able to do it.
I really wonder what she's doing now.
Yeah. I mean, I would love for her to call in. And I mean, I would even be comfortable being, disputing anything we're saying, because I really did. I believed that she, like, when all the people who, like, in the chat even today, talking about her being Art's daughter or them being in a relationship, I still fall in line with the idea of she was being trolled by Art and he was putting her in impossible situations and then enjoying seeing her wiggle out of them. That was the real piece around all of it, most likely in my point of view, until I see other evidence. But I fully believed, because I didn't have any reason not to, that she was in her hometown or wherever she lived doing her thing, and she was remotely working for Art. Over time, I've come to understand that I'm probably massively wrong in that point of view. And like I said earlier, even before the first official episode, I can see a potential that she was already in Parump, putting her roots down there. And that completely goes against the narrative that I thought I knew, and makes it much harder for me to argue against anyone else with any of their theories, because you would think if I'm talking to her every couple days and sometimes every day, multiple times, at some point it would come up that, hey, I'm living in Parump, or I'm living in Art's studio, or wherever it was she was. I even sent her some old audio equipment that I wasn't using anymore. It was like nothing on the scale of anything to write home about, but I mailed it to California. So why would you have me mail it to California unless if you're in Parump? I just,
I'm looking at the comment here from John Keglovich, and he says something to the effect of, if Art was really going to send Heather out to Area 51, that is just insane. And I'm here to tell you that was a real thing. In fact, satellite phones had been purchased because there was a real concern about being able to maintain communicate. This is pre-Starlink. So there was a real concern about being able to maintain communication. And I'm sure it was going to be comprised of nothing more than just walking up to the gate where it says, across this line, you do not. And dude, Asian American, please. I'm quoting the Big Lebowski. I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't know if you. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Hey.
So yeah, if you want to be on the show, the number is going to be 424-672-7594. It's 424-672-7594. The old phone number that I've used since 2009, the 573 number, I still own that number, but you wouldn't believe the headache that I have been looking at and trying to get that number ported to something that I can use as a VoIP solution. But just for nostalgia's sake, I would like to be able to use that number. We will pretty soon. Lilith says somebody ought to take a trip out to the old Art Bell residence and see what's going on. I do not advise that.
Yeah, don't.
I don't advise that.
I saw where somebody went and posted a video on YouTube where they went to Parump and they went to like his gravestone and drove past his house.
Wasn't that, what's his name? He was in the chat here just a little earlier.
I don't know, but I just thought that, I don't know.
He made a whole video of it. If you're thinking of the same video I'm thinking of, I didn't find it too objectionable. In fact, I found it to be rather nice to watch. But
I just thought it was weird. Like,
was it the one where they focused the camera like for an extended amount of time on Art's house?
Well, there was.
Yeah, it was Jedi Miller. Jedi Miller. Thank you, Richard.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
I liked that video. I don't know if that's the same one you're talking about, though.
Yeah, it was. The part that I'm specifically thinking about, like there was going past his house, which I thought was interesting. Like back when he was alive and active, like I get the like art's there, but he's not there anymore, and I don't know why it holds that mind space anymore of being.
It's just the place, people still go to Dealey Plaza as well. And,
well, I mean, same thing. I don't care about that place either. It's a moment in time happened there, and
K-Dub says that's known as stalking Brig.
Right. Well,
it might be classified as such.
I wish Brig would stalk me.
I would let Brig stalk me. There would be no police report. A couple years ago, I was going to go visit Brig, and just life happened, and I never got around to it. But
let's go back to like on our Patreon. If we can get people to actually support us on Patreon, I can see you taking a trip out to interview or to hang out with every member of BellGab and talk to them for 5 minutes. They deserve that. And then I will go live stream with George Cinda, and we'll talk about, his vast library of alien books and paranormal stories. That's what you would get with a donation.
Well, we're coming up on 3 hours here. I feel like, isn't that hard to believe? That really went fast. I'm just thinking back before we go. I mean, are there any other little tidbits, things that... there really is so much, and I wish people would have called in more and asked questions, because that's kind of hard to just. There's so many years of history. I mean, we're talking essentially a 10-year history from 2008 to 2018. Essentially, is the BellGab era. Speaking of 2018, I will say that oddly enough, this website is started in celebration of Art Bell and his body of work. But oddly enough, ironically enough, and sadly enough, and embarrassingly enough, for me personally, one of the most entertaining periods of that forum were the period following Art's death. Not because of Art's death, obviously that wasn't why. It was because of the insanity that erupted publicly after he passed away. Watching Heather get on Twitter and tell John B. Wells that he's a vulture for expressing condolences publicly about Art. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I don't remember.
No, it wasn't
that.
John B. Wells. It was, who's the other guy? He was the news reporter from like Reno, Nevada. And
was it George Knapp?
Yes, George Knapp got on Twitter and expressed condolences about Art dying, and Heather immediately pounced on it and called him a vulture.
Yeah, I do remember that. Man, yeah.
But my point is, stuff like that was just happening on the reg, as the kids say.
The chaos of that was, to me, before Art joined the forum was like the heyday, because the forum was its own thing. The personalities of the forum were the driving point to be there. Like, I didn't post often, but I read a lot. Like I read it every day. So like that part was like the heyday for me. But I understand that the story was turning a new page every day during that period.
Well, I feel a little spent. I feel like even though I know there's so much more to talk about, I just sort of feel like I'm spent. I feel like we did our part, at least tonight. That's all I can really think to talk about. But I mean, I will tell you that Curtis and I are going to be doing the Spec Sheet on an entirely different YouTube channel. But here, I'll still be doing live streams on a regular basis. I think my live streams are going to be comprised mostly of just sort of scanning Twitter and just reading Twitter and reacting in real time to what I see on there and to what I see in the chat room. And it might be ultimately an interesting show, and I don't know, maybe it won't. Guess we'll find out, won't we? Again, I hesitate to call it a show. Maybe it'll be an interesting live stream. I hope that the consensus winds up being that that's the case. But
I agree. So there needs to be some drunk karaoke. Those were some great.
I've never shied from standing in front of a microphone entirely inebriated. There are at least a couple of GabCast episodes where I might have tipped back on Grandpa's old cough medicine as Jeff Daniels. No, not Jeff Daniels. Who's the guy in Dumb and Dumber? That wasn't Jeff Daniels who said that. That was the cop, whatever his name was. Okay. He was the guy who did
I've never seen Dumb and Dumber.
You've heard of 8-minute abs? Well, I got 7-minute abs. Do you remember that movie? I don't
seen that
remember
movie.
what movie that is, but he's the same guy
Okay.
who says that. But what a
Yeah,
way
so-
to lock out the show, talking about the 7-minute abs guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely follow Michael on all the social channels. Follow the Spec Sheet as well. You're going to get different flavors of conversations. And instead of saying your live streams, you're engaging with a community that is interested in what we're saying and giving us something back at the same time in terms of engagement and telling us your stories too. So everyone do connect, join with us, share it with friends. I think some cool experiences are still out there to be had.
Specsheet.tech is the website. And again, if you want to go there, it's the clearinghouse with all of our links. It's laid out pretty simply. It'll get you straight to our YouTube channel. And it's got the Patreon link. Anything pertaining to what we're doing is all right there. Specsheet.tech.
Yeah.
And you know something, Curtis, I want to say publicly that I've said to you privately, and that is, you say the nicest things to me sometimes about how you think that I should have been picked for this or that, or just that I make normal conversations seem interesting. But I just want to tell you, with everybody listening, I think you are a fabulous broadcaster, and there has never been a conversation in doing shows with you that there's never been a road I've gone down where Curtis couldn't meet me halfway and upstage me in many ways frequently. He never seems unprepared. He's always ready to speak to whatever it is I randomly threw out there.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Despite the fact that Curtis never toots his own horn, I just want to say I think Curtis is a fabulous broadcaster. And we've been doing live streams together since 2009. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's such a long time. Can you believe we've never met up?
I know,
That's
it's amazing,
insanity,
isn't it?
actually, to
I know.
me. I'm afraid you're going to actually find out about my missing leg. I've tried my best to conceal that from the listening audience and forum users for many years, but the cat on that's going to be out of the bag.
So,
The what?
So I'll spill the tea on that. If we met in person, I'd tell everybody the real secret about like the fact that you actually have like a rat tail on the back of your hair. Yeah.
Anthony, thank you for saying that, and I hope you're still enjoying life, running in marathons, and doing whatever it is that you do that makes yourself happy out there, and all that. There's another great story, by the way. Richard C. Hoagland and Saucy Rossi becoming his producer, and Richard Hoagland shitting on him, and just all of the drama. There was so much drama on this. It's like so many comments I see here could send me down these different roads, all these sub-stories of events that occurred, and just...
like I'm fine with not going into it because I think the stream has wound down, but there's the whole Bateman versus...
It's winding down.
It's winding down now. That was great. All the little sayings, like
I know,
just
all
saw
these little
19.5.
catchphrases,
Yeah,
pray for Goatsy.
Yeah, all these things. But like the Bateman versus Heather showdown on the GabCast episode, like all of that stuff, like that could be, a 15-minute conversation. Like I'd be more interested in hearing other people's opinions of it, but
You know something? I'm always talking about what a nice human being Curtis is and how much it annoys me how nice he is, because when I'm interacting with him, there are these moments where I realize what a piece of shit I am because I'm interacting with Curtis, because he's just so nice. And I think back on that night that Curtis hosted the GabCast and Bateman and Heather both called in and were going at each other's throats. And Curtis was just sort of sitting back, letting things unfold organically the way they were going to unfold, which I said to you the other night when we were talking about that night. I think it's a good thing you were there instead of me, because I probably would have inserted myself a lot more than you inserted yourself. And I probably would have spoken more as well. No, I'm kidding. That was a bit of a joke. But I think I would have. I think I would have stepped on a lot more moments than you did. And but I was saying to Curtis the other night, being the nice guy that you are, and you don't really ever wind up rolling in the slop that much and getting associated with things that might be a little questionable, I guess. And so I said to Curtis, do you ever just like think back on that night that you were hosting that show and say to yourself, holy shit, I cannot believe I was there hosting that show? Like in retrospect, when I look back on it, I cannot believe I was sitting there a part of that, because it's out of character for you to have anything to do with what was going on there that night. It's just, and it's this seminal moment in the evolution of things there toward the end. And who's there? Curtis is there at so many crucial junctures of this story. I'm so sick of people acting like I've got my finger on the pulse of something. You're looking at the wrong guy.
I like attaching you to all of those things. But like, yeah, I mean, for a long time, I had the point of view, and like you and I were talking about it, that like I probably was the wrong person at the wrong time to be sitting there. Like I definitely felt that in the moment, but also feeling that I'm going to be fair and even. Like I'm going to make sure that Bateman gets to say whatever he wants to say, and Heather gets to respond and say what she wants to, and they get to go back and forth fairly. After that, they're going to write their own narrative during the conversation, and I'm going to stay out of it. And I recognize the critiques that say that I was too passive during it and I didn't push it, because if you had been there, you wouldn't have been as passive as I was, and we would have got something else that would have been its own version of gold. Because you probably could have molded a conversation that didn't reach the points it could have. You could have helped pushed it to do that. So yeah, there are just two different ways of doing that moment. But later on, more recently, I've found a way to appreciate my experience with it better than I did before, by realizing that sometimes you do need someone who will just let the two people bury themselves. And that's what I was in that position. Is Bateman was going to look good or look bad. You're muted if you're.
Hold on. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
I don't think anybody came away from that phone call that night looking good. You did, but nobody else did.
Well, and the thing is that I didn't think I looked good or bad. I think that there was critiques that you could give me, but yeah, I think Bateman and the critiques are
from
just
my perspective, you looked good because you just sort of sat back and let things transpire.
Yeah, I'll take that. But yeah, like that's the thing, is that sometimes you need that. Like some moments just need to let people have the space to screw themselves over. And yes, I'm not the person to open up the space to say, hey, screw yourself over. But if you're going to do it, I'll let you, like, again, in that moment, it was big enough that Heather had made accusations, Bateman had made accusations. Defend yourself or don't, and you can have your own point of view on who you think won and lost in that conversation. But I think speaking for yourself and defending accusations against you in a rational way is the easiest way to win it. And I have my own point of view, who I think came out of that sounding more rational.
Well, it's BellGab history. It's over and done. The past is the past. Now we can reminisce and think back.
That's right.
I kind of wonder, I can't see, like, if the forum had continued on, I just can't even begin to wrap my brain around what its purpose for existing would be. And now especially, I feel like with X having evolved in the way it has, where you don't have to work. I still don't view X entirely as a free speech venue, but I do feel like in terms of, at least relative to every other venue there is out there, I think it's more free than anything else that's out there right now. Enough so that I'm not sure that a BellGab really needs to exist anyway. I think going to X in the year 2024 satisfies a lot of the itches that needed to be scratched for certain people, and with a much larger user base to see what you want to say.
Yeah, well, the fact that it can cover so many different conversations is beneficial, I think, because BellGab, like Mike Franklin here saying that BellGab was its own universe. It encapsulated a moment in time that needed to have a space for it, and like having it be read only now, I think, is good, because it would just fade into nothingness, and I think you would lose a lot of that story if it was still active. So I was listening to, or actually watching, a YouTuber recently say, with all the different YouTubers who've been retiring lately, that there is something special and magical about something being done, like doing something for a certain period of time, riding the wave of what that thing is, and then knowing that it goes off into the distance and it's never going to happen again. Like this conversation, I don't think we're going to sit and talk about BellGab really that much more. Like if someone wants to ask questions or get involved in it and comments and direct questions, sure. But it's not like we're going to get together once a week and talk about BellGab. We've moved on to the next step of it. It's good to reminisce on it and remember that it was there. because it did bring a large group of people together, but it had its moment, and that moment isn't now.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, it
Big
has.
thanks to everybody who joined in tonight. We really appreciate it. It was really fun to look at the chat and just see it scrolling, and your comments, some of which were repeatable, some were not, but we saw them nevertheless. So
Yes.
we're very thankful. And so, yeah, check us out. It is going to be specsheet.tech. If you want to check out our tech podcast that we're going to do on a regular basis right here. And also, we're going to have it here on YouTube. We're going to have it on X. We're going to have it, I'm saying here on YouTube, but we're being streamed
Yeah,
on X right now.
We're being multicast. Like,
So it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be streamed on YouTube, X, Rumble.
Yep, we have a Rumble, which that's something. So if you're interested in live streaming at all, like for yourself, for gaming,
Don't
whatever.
give them tips. No, we can't have
Well, no,
you got to give our competitors tips, Curtis.
but no, the thing is that there's some cool stuff out there that even I didn't realize that you've brought to the table that kind of blows me away that other people aren't talking about how easy it is. Because going back to something on the live stream you did a few days ago, or at least I think it was a live stream, at least it was a video talking about how easy it is to do this kind of stuff now compared to the past. Like it was when you started live streaming, the barrier to entry was a lot higher, and you had to teach me the pieces of it too to be able to get to the point where I could do it. Now that's gone. Like, so on the spec sheet, I want us to talk about and present some of these things that we've learned about how easy it is to do this. Everyone should be out there having a conversation about whatever is interesting to you, because it's not hard to do. But come to us first and listen to us. We'll tell you all the tips.
All right, ladies and gents, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you when we see you next. Bye.
See ya.